Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the 14th of April, 10 a.m., and we are going to work until 2 p.m. This is not symbolic. This is just convenient time for our work. So today we are closing the project towards safe, healthy, and declared work in Ukraine, and we summarize what has been achieved due to these joint efforts. Pay attention so that in the name of the project, in the title of the project, it lacks one word that very often is mentioned in this kind of project titles. This is two words. I mean, we are already on the path. It means that, well, first steps have already been undertaken. We are already in the process. And that means that still a lot of work is expecting us. And today we do not do not end this work. We will do some assessments, some summarizing, and of course, that will make it possible for us to work further on the same cause. And by the way, I checked the Ukrainian dictionary, what labor is, what work is. So this is the accumulation of targeted actions that require physical or mental energy, cognitive energy, and that are aimed at creating material and spiritual values. Here, I can only disagree with or, physical or mental energy, because of course, both of these types of energy are needed. And this is what we are going to do during the next 4 hours of work. And we even are going to have a break, and that doesn't often happen during online events, but the organizers, being very experienced, have taken into account the well-being of our participants and of our outstanding simultaneous interpreters who will also need a break. Today we have 2 very professional simultaneous interpreters, not just professional, but also having had experience with the project. So in the bottom of your screens, you can see the button that looks like a globe. And there you can choose your English or Ukrainian interpretation channel, or you can follow the original sound, and then you can follow us. So today we work in Ukrainian and English, and we have quite a tight agenda, and I am fully responsible for compliance with the agenda. So when people we refer to as speakers, but actually in Ukrainian it's better to say promovets. So when these people are going to approximate, to come dangerously close to the deadline, to the limit, I will very strictly tell them, you have 30 seconds left. You also can respond to what is going to happen in the course of our discussion. You can raise hand using the emoji. So please do that if you have questions, feedback, comment about what's being said, and then you will have your floor after our participants, speakers complete. And also during the discussion, those who are not participating in the discussion, please stay muted. And also, I believe we have here people named like Dell or iPhone, or if you have another name on the screen that doesn't identify you, so that we knew who asks for the floor so that I could introduce you. So please change your names to indicating your name and surname, or indicate the organization that you are representing. And by the way, I am Andrei Kulikov, and today I am going to moderate this session. I'm going to moderate this event today, and so if our technical aspects are clear and settled, and since nobody's raising hands to say no, that something is unclear, so then everything is clear, and I believe that we can proceed with the agenda, and let's be attentive, because as I have mentioned, you will have a chance to ask questions, to come up with feedback, with your assessment, to compare with your vision with what you hear from our speakers. And please don't wait for them to finish. You can raise your hand, or you can write in the chat as a response, so that I could also follow and see how many questions or how extensive a discussion we're going to have after interventions of those indicated in our agenda. So now I'm very happy to launch today's event. So who could know the sector better than those who have been project managers, who were and who are project managers. So in January 2020 through October 2021, it was Mr. Antonio Santos. So Antonio, the floor is yours now. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to see you.
Well, it's I hope you are listening to me. It is a pleasure to be here with you, to see so many friendly faces, some of which I don't see for quite a while. It was a pleasure to be with you, Andrei Kulnikov, because as you might remember, you were the one that launched this project in November 2019. So it is a very happy coincidence to meet you again in this capacity of yours. So it's a privilege to have you with us also, and I'm very happy to see a lot of representatives of the trade unions, of the employers' organizations, of the ministry, of the labor inspectorate, that are more than persons you know. They are persons that you work with during a lot of time, and that give you the privilege of calling them friends, and that is very important. So, good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I was asked to talk a bit about the expectations, the implementation of the project, and the challenges that we faced. Well, I didn't face a challenge, at least a challenge like you are having now. And that is really something that I don't know what to say about that. The challenge that we had was COVID-19 at that time. And it was at the beginning of the project, and no one was prepared for that, for the dimension of the challenge. But our project managed to jump immediately from a face-to-face based project to an online interaction project pretty easily, I would say, with the support of all of you. But the main challenges was the fact that at that time no one seems to know what to do to combine in a better way the worries and the concerns about the occupational safety and health of the workers and the need to ensure the business continuity. So the project with the support of the EU delegation, had to make some alterations and had to create conditions to respond to these needs of the constituents, of the trade unions, of the employers, and of the state labor service. So, and in that case, what we did at that time was to build the capacity of the stakeholders, so of the employers, of the workers, and of the labor inspectors, on how to prevent the occupational risk that represented COVID, what preventive measures and what protective measures should be in place in order to, at the same time, minimize the risks of contagion and at the same time keep business running. And we developed a lot of materials, translated a lot of international materials, provided countless trainings to employers, to workers, to labor inspectors, some of which in partnership with WHO and with FAO. And also we have made available a lot of guidelines, a lot of brief notes about how to handle this challenge. And at the same time, we keep implementing the other components of the project. This was really the main challenge that we faced. And of course, we have other challenges that we have been working on the previous project, and that was to raise awareness for the importance of occupational safety and health, the importance of having an effective labor inspection system, the importance and how to align national legislation on labor inspection and occupational safety and health with international labor standards and with the EU acquis. So, and that path was continued. And getting a bit back to COVID, I would say that if there was anything good that resulted from COVID, I think it was in Ukraine that it had as a consequence to put occupational safety and health on the top of the political agenda. And through addressing specifically the problem of COVID, we had the opportunity of expanding the intervention in a wider form, and with the support of the State Labor Service, of the Ministry of Economy, and also with the support of trade unions and employees organizations, we managed to draft a OSH law, to discuss it, to exchange ideas, and to align it with the international labor standards and EU acquis. And I suppose that this law is now at the CMU for approval. So this was not done by the project. I'm sorry, this was done by you, not by the project. We just facilitated. You are the ones that are doing it. And looking back and asking myself, what are the main results of the project? The main results of the project are you. I think you are a bit different than when I arrived to Ukraine 4 years ago or 5 years ago. That's what I think it's the most important achievement of the project. We are all speaking now in Ukraine the same language. When we talk about occupational safety and health, you know what we are talking about. When we talk about OSH services, you know what we are talking about. We are on the same page. Everybody now in Ukraine understands the relevance of aligning national legislation with international labor standards and with EU acquis. Everybody knows how to do it, how should be done, what are the phases. Everybody knows what are the main aspects of the EU legislation on OSH and the main aspects of the international labor standards on OSH and on labor inspection. Everybody have a common, although there are different opinions about the impact of this or that provision on the country. I think everybody knows the provisions and everybody knows what is the way. And another result that I suppose it's we can say that it's also a very important and I suppose sustainable outcome of this project is that for the last years this project ended up to be a platform for the social dialogue. We sat hundreds of times with employers and workers in the government at the same time discussing these problems with different views, of course, with different opinions, but we had the chance to talk to each other. And
Mr. Santos, I'm afraid that you have only 30 seconds left to talk to each other and to us all.
Thank you. Okay. So I will just say, looking at the agenda, what are also my expectations. And my expectations is that the OSH law is approved, that you start to transpose the individual directives on OSH also, and that you will be able to adopt also legislation regulating labor inspection, which is very important, and that legislation is aligned with ILO Convention 81 and 129. And I just want to say a last word to State Labor Inspectorate, to say that that is also one of the main results of the project, is that now we look at the State Labor Service in a different way. State Labor Service communicates better with the beneficiaries of its activities. State Labor Services is able to plan their activities and to gather information about what they've done and to provide information to other parties. State Labor Inspectorate also is developing specific campaigns on OSH, on undeclared work, and they also improved substantially their capacity to provide information to workers and employers and to provide technical advice and information. So that is also something that should be stressed here. And I wish you all the best. I miss Ukraine. I miss you guys. And I'm very sorry about the war. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава і слава тим людям, які
Glory to heroes and glory to those people who, with their day-to-day work, support the heroes. And what we have heard from Antonia Santos, this is so sincere and authentic, especially the last statements, even though he didn't fit into those 30 seconds that was left. However, in this last statement, we could hear of course, his main contribution into project management, project leadership. This is sincerity, involvement, commitment. And I've known Mr. Santos for years, and I'm grateful to him. And I believe that I'm speaking on behalf of most of the people here, if not everyone. But of course, people sometimes move to other jobs, they change their sector. And we also have a new project manager who, since October 2021 till April 2023, has managed the project. This is Mr. Zsoltudas. And now we are going to hear him. Mr. Tudas, Antonia Santos set the limit of 12 minutes 30 seconds. I believe that you can stick to that as well. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kulikov. Dobrego rano svim. Good morning, dear colleagues, dear friends. It is, I think, a special honor and privilege to talk to you today, which is both a happy and a sad occasion. And I think this is not the first time where we will have moments of somewhat elevated feelings. And I think that's quite natural. I think we all put ourselves, our bests, more than just the work. It is always more than just the work. I think Antonio's presentation quite neatly described when we are asked in this part of the program to talk about the challenges. Is the very first challenge when I arrived in October. How do you come into a project that was so excellently led and supported by an excellent team? How you try to give your contribution to a really outstanding work that has been done by the predecessor. So I think that I'd like to say as a very first challenge when it came to the time of mid-October. And I remember, I just noted down in preparation for this, I remember Antonio, Sofia and Ina took me the first night we met to the place in Kiev on the Maidan Nezalezhnosti, which is called Dostania Barrikada, if you remember that. So we were on the barricades from the first night on, trying to discuss and handing over some of the issues when it comes to that. Unfortunately, and I agree with Antonio, the challenges we will talk about in project implementation look very small compared to the challenges you are facing. And I think it is the thing that has happened, which we did not expect. You cannot be ready for war. I remember the last days of discussions before we had to leave Kiev, did not believe it will happen. You cannot, whatever steps you are thinking, you cannot be prepared for that. That was coming on the 24th of February. You cannot be prepared for war. So, but it happens. It happened. It was an unprovoked aggression on Ukraine, and there are the consequences that are still with us today. And I think when it comes to that, leaving Kiev was a painful decision, and trying to regroup and try to address some of the issues related to project implementation was and remains till today a challenge. We had to regroup. We found ourselves, our project team, in different parts of the world. And I really think that the challenge was how to try to do still the things we can do together, and how we can try to come up perhaps with some activities that would fit into the new circumstance. I think I want to, in this juncture, really express my gratitude to all, but particularly some people that were a key to this, that we managed to show not only inspired by the resilience of your country and by your people, but actually with the colleagues, that we managed to come up with some activities and some steps that we have taken to address some of these new needs. I would really like to thank Mr. Igor Degnera from the SLS. He was the first person I went over to the other office just across to say that I'm leaving, and we'll be trying to do whatever we can. And I still remember Igor's words. He said, "Don't worry, there is Zoom. We'll find out. We will show. We will show. We will show that we can." And I think this is what we actually did. And I'm really grateful for his team, for all the good colleagues from the SLS, because in the weeks coming, when the outbreak of war, we actually managed to come up with a number of activities that was a result of brainstorming us together. I also want to thank the specialists, the SOSH colleagues and OSH, because some of the activities and brainstorming from early days of the conflict inspired us to do. And of course, the colleagues from the Ministry of Economy, of course, the trade union colleagues from the movement, of course, the colleagues from the business community and the employers organizations. It was the key to try to get to. So we did come up with 3 topics, 3 activities that will be described later on. And I think really the credit for this goes for those that have managed to create such an environment where we are, despite of the difficult situations, we're able to brainstorm and do it. And of course, while this event is, of course, the celebration of all of you, and I fully agree with Antonio with this, because this is what it is. You are the one implementing. We are just supporting. It's your lead and us behind. But I also would like to seize the opportunity to thank Sophia, to thank Ina, thank Linda, and thank all the colleagues that will be mentioned later on, because they, within our little group, and there are more than I mentioned, and I don't want to, cannot name them all, but they know who they are, and I know that they think that I think of them. You are the ones that created this drive and this inspiration that fed us to be able to support. And of course, Xenia Lepeja with the psychosocial lead, it has been an excellent work, and we are so glad that we are able to do this. Of course, the legendary Dmitry Matvichuk, who has had spared no effort to support this, Olga Bogdanova and others, many others that I cannot name due to the lack of time, who I really greatly appreciate that and honored to be part of and be able to discuss. The difficult part of this is, of course, that at the moment, what we can say is that we have tried our best, and that's why I said this is both a good and, of course, a sad occasion. But definitely, the story does not end now. We created the frame, but you are painting this picture, and we are definitely thinking that with your lead, the ILO will be around. There are things that's gonna continue to happen, and the challenges are only multiplying, because the last that I want to say before concluding this, that during the tenure with the project, there was a historic development, and that is the challenge of Ukraine receiving the candidate country status with the European Union. And it is the stated ambition and a goal for your country. And I think this is and will remain a paramount challenge, that our little work and our little technical contribution in the field of occupational safety and health, labor inspection, and the whole labor reform that colleagues in the ILO are dealing with, it is something that will continue to be supported. I want to express, I expressed it many times, my personal solidarity. I want to say Slava Ukraini as well. I hope for the best. I give back the floor to Andrei. Thank you very much. Дуже дякую.
Дуже дякую, пане Дудаш.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dudas. So you say, I want to say glory to Ukraine, and you do say glory to Ukraine. It's a very proper thing. Your words, your deeds reflect your words. Pay attention, Antonio is writing in Ukrainian in our chat. This is the message with good wishes in Ukrainian, but we often face a dilemma. We say we, but in fact, we mean everyone who is present here. It's not an appropriate thing, perhaps, measure each other's contributions. It's complicated. Some time ago, we could not even imagine the challenges we would face with in 2022. That we should keep in mind that at the time of the project start, the COVID challenge was absolutely unexpected for many of us as well. People do not adapt to the circumstances, but they adapt circumstances to their needs. And thus, it's possible to proceed. In English, we have the word occupation. It has different meanings in Ukrainian. Occupation can mean some professional involvement, but it also can mean some part of the territory being captured. Unfortunately, we see two meanings of this word now. And from you, we heard that Ukraine has received the status, the candidate status. It's like saying Ukraine received independence. The proper word would be Ukraine gained independence and Ukraine gained the status of candidate, because Ukrainians invested lots of efforts into this process, and many people like Antonio, like Jolt, stood by, of course, just like other partners, representatives of international organizations, and everyone, of course, is now with Ukraine. We highly appreciate this. Sorry, someone is writing that there is no interpretation into Ukrainian. Simultaneous interpretation is working. Either to listen to Ukrainian simultaneous interpretation, you have to click on the globe button. At the bottom panel, you will find the options such as original audio, English and Ukrainian channel. So you may select Ukrainian channel and then listen to Ukrainian interpretation, and of course, vice versa. By the way, we got this message from the user while I asked everyone to change your names, to indicate your names. We see just user. So Mr. User or Miss User, please specify your name for us to know who we are dealing with. And let me ask also administrator to verify whether the person has changed his or her name, unless the user indicates the name and the organization, or we may regard this as an attempt to do some harm. So let me again express gratitude to the ILO, to the European Union that made a great contribution. Our next topic is harmonization and approximation of legislation. In the first place, we imply the labor and OSH legislation function in the European Union. So now let's proceed to the topic approximation of the labor standards of Ukraine to the European standards. In any case, at the beginning of every session, we will be quoting famous people. Sir Brian Appleton, in this case, said that safety is not an intellectual exercise to keep us in work. It's a matter of our contributions to safety management that determines whether the people we work with live or die. And in this respect, we should mention that people live or die not only during wartime, but also during the peaceful time. So the time frame for each speaker will be 5 minutes, and after Everyone has taken the floor. We will have a Q&A session. The speakers may answer the questions asked either by you, dear participants, or by me, because I would like to use the opportunity and ask my own questions. And the first speaker will be Mr. Ivan Nahornyak from the government, representing the Office for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration. Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to Mr. Ivan Nahornyak from the Governmental Office to coordinate the European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Over to you. Dear Andrei, can you hear me well? Yes, we can both hear and see you well. Perfect. I'd like to start my brief contribution with saying that signing association agreement has been absolutely crucial for Ukraine. We gained this agreement, we paid a dear price for that, and at that time we realized that Ukraine will do everything to implement the association agreement. We are aware of the fact that this agreement includes Annex number 40, aimed at implementing important European Union acts in the field of social policy and labor relations. As of 2018, it seemed that the implementation progressed quite well. Nonetheless, I recall my meeting with Vasily Andreev, the representative of trade unions of Ukraine. We had quite a substantial discussion of the status quo on the ground. He presented some statistic data on occupational traumas, occupational injuries, especially at the construction sites, and this statistic was much higher than average in the European Union. So it became absolutely clear that implementation of directives, regulations, and conventions, ILO conventions, was essential not only for the sake of progressing in terms of legislation. It was important to save lives of our citizens. And starting back then, the government of Ukraine and the Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration started paying attention to implementation of directives and regulations that are reflected in the Annex number 40. It is absolutely clear that we have our own history of social relations.
Of social
Many people
labor relations, and the inheritance from the USSR makes it possible for us to speak about a socially oriented state. But when we started discussing some particular things, situation and building sites, construction sites, or labor protection, we could see that the situation was so different. And that's why I'm so grateful to the EU-ILO project team, who unfortunately wrap up their work today, because they've done a lot together with us to bring Ukraine closer to the European legislation as we have committed to under association agreement. And if we consider where the relevant EU legislation is now in the context of labor protection and labor relations, what's mentioned in the association agreement is not brand new. I mean, one of the directives that actually is very important in the context of labor protection is the directive of 1989, number 391. So we can imagine, if we speak about the so-called social package of the European Union that was politically adopted in the end of 2010 of the second decade of this century, we see that this is not something super advanced. These are basic things that we need to implement. And the implementation of ILO Convention 81/129, well, I understand that we still need to do a lot in order to come closer to the relevant EU law. And the EU-ILO project supported the Ministry of Economy and the governmental office to assess and to support implementation of EU directives and regulations, ILO conventions in the field of protection of workers' rights. So employees' rights, and also apart from implementation, the project supported us, the Governmental Office for Coordination of European and Euro-Atlantic integration. And I would like to express gratitude to the project team for their involvement in the time, in very difficult times for Ukraine. In April and May last year, the project team helped us a lot to verify, to draft in English answers of Ukraine to the questionnaire of the European Commission, which actually was helped us to gain the candidacy status for the EU. And I believe that this project, the work started by the project will continue in Ukraine, and a lot of things have been implemented, and I'm sure that representatives of the Ministry of Economy, they will provide more details on what the government is doing now in the context of implementation of the EU law in the field of labor protection. And I would like to express gratitude to project leaders for their commitment. And thank you so much, and I'll be ready to address your questions. Thank you, Ivan. It was so convincing that so far we have no questions, but we have a message from Sofia Litvin. It was such a pleasure to work with the dynamic team of the governmental office, and actually listening to you was also a lot of pleasure, even though it was very brief. Okay, but at least we stick with the agenda. You mentioned the Ministry of Economy, and now the floor goes to Tetiana Berezhna, representative of the Ministry of Economy. You're welcome. Good morning, dear colleagues.
To our international colleagues, we are really very grateful for your support and your help, and it helps our country in bringing national legislation closer to the standards of the International Labour Organization and the European Union. And I would like to proceed in Ukrainian with the results, with the specific results. So, всім доброго дня ще раз.
So welcome everyone. Again, I will not take too much of your time, but I would like to speak about the results that we specifically can present today, that we can share based on results of our work with the project. And I should say that due to the many years of ILO EU project together with the Minister of Economy, SLS, and all parties to the social dialogue experts. On the 27th of March last year, finally, the draft law of Ukraine on OSH was submitted to the cabinet, and you understand that that was quite a significant achievement. And you know that the law is aimed at developing the new national system to prevent occupational risks by implementing at the legislative level of risk-oriented approach, and it is also aimed at implementing provisions of the Directive 391 on implementing the activities to promote OSH. That is why I would like to express gratitude for significant contribution to the project, contribution to capacity building for SLS. Another outcome that I would like to mention, to implement the order of first Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine, the Minister of Economy, Ms. Sviridenko. The ministry developed a draft law, which has quite a long name, but it is very important, I believe. It is on amending certain legislative acts of Ukraine on delineation of powers of central authorities in the field of industrial safety, OSH, hygiene, occupational hygiene, and handling of explosives, mining oversight. So this draft law was adopted at the governmental session, at the cabinet session in March this year. And by the way, I mentioned the wrong year. Yes, we submitted the draft law to the cabinet this year, of course. I'm speaking about 2022. I still have not switched to 2023. So OSH law draft law was submitted this year. So all of this work is being implemented in order to help SLS comply with and the requirements that would make it possible for them to focus on priority tasks, and that is fighting undeclared labor in Ukraine, counteracting the informal sector. And this draft law is also a significant achievement for us, and we hope that further on it will be positively that it will be supported by the parliament. And when this draft law was developed, the EU-ILO project was also involved. We had a lot of consultation sessions with them, and we had this substantial documents, preliminary recommendations for a revision of the draft on SLS of Ukraine. So we took all of those comments into account, and then the draft was submitted to the government, and the government adopted it. And now, to wrap up my intervention, let me mention that we have these two specific outcomes and a lot of other aspects of very fruitful cooperation, where the project is always ready to support us and to advise. We are so grateful because this ongoing support is so important. Let me also mention that we are going to openly and gratefully welcome new projects of the team ILO projects in Ukraine to on the path towards towards safe and declared labor in Ukraine, on capacity building for SLS and approximation of Ukrainian legislation and international labor standards. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for this opportunity to get to know you and to work with you. This has been very high expert level, and there has been a lot of human touch. I always emphasize that. Thank you for your openness and sincerity. I was also very moved by what Antonia has said, what Zoltan shared at the beginning, because really our collaboration is more than working on capacity building or legislative acts. This is person-to-person human interaction, exchange of, if not dreams, but ideals, values, and thank you for that. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you for this very profound but also brief intervention. You said, I don't want to take your time, to waste your time, but you are not wasting your time. You shared your time with everyone who is here in the audience. And this sharing aspect, doing something together, this is very much the essence of what the project focused on and the Ukrainian counterparts that worked with the project. And now I pass the floor to Vasil Andreev, Federation of Trade Unions. You're welcome. Thank you, Andrei. I have started my timer so that I could follow the time and I will be electrocuted if I take more time. You know that sometimes they cut off electricity. Okay, then it will not work. So, dear colleagues, good morning on behalf of trade union community, on behalf of everyone who during these 4 weeks have been involved into the project, into the previous project. So it is so nice to participate together with you in the final conference. And just to continue with what Ms. Berezhna has said, you know, that we've been promoting this project so that it did not end here, even after the new OSH law is adopted or the new law on SLS is adopted, because that's so important for the entire community of workers. We have more than 10 million of them in the state. And we remember the phrase said by Antonia that nobody goes to work in the morning in order to die there during the working day. And this phrase, well, I believe it mobilizes us all to do this joint work as we've been doing during these 4 years. Together with trade union community, for the first time, we could see this very vibrant social dialogue, openness on the part of the governmental counterparts as well. And we often heard that we need to come into agreement with the employers for our decisions to be efficient. And you have been very open to feedback, and to us it is about implementing amendments to legislation and where there are some risks for workers at the workplace, at the formal and in workplace and in informal employment, communication at the work desk or at coffee, a cup of coffee, and more informal relationships, which have also developed in our joint work during the 4 years, and working outside of the city when we went for that retreat in order to develop the first draft of OSH law. And we are happy to hear that it has been submitted to the cabinet. So for us, this consultations and these cornerstones or milestones that were mentioned by the trade unions regarding the refusal to work and how is it possible to do that in the framework of the European legislation. So, but then we started developing the new legislation on public control, on development of the technical inspection by trade unions, which is an important lever that helps us to keep this momentum to develop the OSH achievements. All of that generated very fast response from the project, and I'm very grateful, especially for that discussion in January with Zoltan and Sofia, where within several hours they responded to the request of trade unions, and they said we are going to have the new legislation, but we have this obsolete modalities of work. So could you please suggest some best practices from various sectors of the EU, how they do that, how they work in OSH, and how they organize representation of trade unions, where we're supposed to invest so that people were healthy, alive, and so that they had no apprehension of dying or being injured at the workplace, especially now when there is this mining issue. Of course, for us, this is something that will require a lot of interventions in the next years or even decades. We are very grateful to use the analytical documents that have been released and that are outputs of the project. So together with employers, we will further explore those issues that may arise, for example, in the context of introducing insurance instead of permits for hazardous work, and a lot of other aspects that still that remain after the project. Speaking about personal relationships that you develop after this many years together, I've mentioned that already, and it was so nice that our coordinators and the team invested so much effort to not only enrich us with new knowledge and new prospects in the field of OSH, but they also get involved into Ukrainian culture, even the language. I'm grateful to Antonia and to Joel that you start and you end at every training with words, glory to Ukraine and glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you, Vasil, as ever, very profoundly, deeply, and forward-lookingly. And that's due to your good knowledge of what's going on. With this kind of speakers, it makes it easy for the moderator because you always tell me who the next one is going to be. So Mr. Nagornyak mentioned the Minister of Economy, we heard. Ms. Berezhna and Vasil mentioned employers, and of course, I now pass the floor to Serhiy Bilenki, representing the Federation of Employers of Ukraine. You're welcome. Good morning, dear colleagues. It's so nice to participate in this event today. And above all, I will not be original, so I would like to express gratitude to the ILO EU project. For 4 years, we've been doing very important work. Regarding the results of this work, I believe Antonia, Santush, and Joel, they were spot on. Antonia said that the main outcome is us, and Joel said that as a result of the work, we have set the frame and you are going to draw the picture. And here I cannot but agree with the dear colleagues. That's true. The project has made us much more knowledgeable than before in the context of, in the field of EU legislation in the OSH area, directives, ILO directives, and EU Council, and also EU regulations. At the same time, we also had to do our homework, and I mean all the 3 counterparts, employers, trade unions, and the government and the state. And the result of that would be the coordinated draft OSH law. And here, maybe I will add a little bit of criticism into our discussion. I can hardly agree with Tatiana Berezhna about that. The main outcome is that the draft law was submitted to the government on the 27th of March. It would have been much better if this draft law were preliminarily coordinated and agreed by all parties in the social dialogue. And let me mention that we have the joint possession of 2 representative bodies from employers and employees about that this draft law does not fully take into account interests of each of the parties in the social dialogue. And let me now, to avoid speculation, to mention the following, that employers fully realize that Ukraine has opted for European path of development, and we are going to join the European family, become EU member state, and for that sake, we need to undergo a very difficult way of implementing EU legislation into Ukrainian legislation, in particular implementation of ILO conventions that have not yet been implemented.
At the same time, we've always emphasized the fact that the approach towards implementation should be absolutely well balanced. We have to keep in mind the peculiarities of the national legislation as well as certain traditions of national legal drafting. It is not possible to copy directly the directives and the conventions, and not always such copy-paste practice results in positive outcomes. However, we've got also examples of positive cooperation at the trilateral level and at the level of the EU legislation approximation. Yesterday, the president signed the document on the collective agreements we have worked on for a long time. This document is fully supported by both trade unions and the employers. Maybe there are some peculiarities, but they are not as significant. Coming back to the occupational safety and health, what are our concerns? Unfortunately, we did not see the final iteration which was submitted to the government. But what we see is that the level of workers' production has significantly increased in comparison to the previous old legislation and some legal acts acting in EU. At the same time, we do not think that this draft law we think that this draft law does not fully correspond the directive number 391, and we think that the development of small and medium enterprises may be inhibited by the additional regulatory burden envisaged by the law, and this burden is not always justified for the business. In terms of high-risk works, we see that the special permits or insurance should be obtained. While in many EU countries, such works are delivered on the basis of simple declarations, and this does not provoke an increase in the injury rate. We believe that the regulatory and sanctioning functions of the state do not always improve the statistics we are guided by when we try to make amendments to the legislation. You've got 30 seconds, Sergey. Okay, yes, I'm going to close my speech. In fact, there is much to say. After the draft law is approved by the government, we will be finalizing it on the platform of the Verkhovna Rada. Of course, we would like to take into consideration the project's recommendations as well as the social partners' positions. Thank you very much for your good job. Thank you for this project, and I'm sure that finally we'll have OSH at the level of the best global practices. Thank you very much. Sergey, definitely we will achieve that because we are investing lots of efforts, and the representative of trade unions raised very important issues as well as some discrepancies arising within the social dialogue. Our agenda is quite logical. Therefore, our next speaker will be the person who is very knowledgeable about social dialogue. This is Ms. Natalia Nalychenko, the former secretary of the Trilateral Social Economic Council at a very responsible time. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you for this invitation. Frankly speaking, while working at this position, I acquired lots of skills to continue this social dialogue. Social dialogue is the main tool to ensure social protection and reach agreements in the field of labor safety. Implementation of this project means three achievements for me. First, approximation of the national legislation to the international labor standards, because actually the Trilateral Socio-Economic Council has become a platform to share opinions on the mentioned draft law. As said by Sergei and Vasil, we are all humans and we all have our own approaches and our own vision. In some instances, we did not reach an agreement. However, we tried to listen to each other to drive the discussion. And that's very important for us because I see that we may reach the consensus in the end. Then, secondly, this project trained the Ukrainian experts in labor legislation. Labor inspectors also got some experience in psychosocial support. It's quite important because with the onset of war, it was a great value. The management of project and Ms. Litvin in particular responded very quickly to the needs of our society, our workers and employers in terms of psychosocial support, I mean. And I would like to say that as this support had a very positive effect for the national council, for the secretariat, and for the territorial councils as well, because we participated in some activities and the territorial councils were also involved. It's one of the positive elements. Altogether, territorial councils, national council, and the secretariat discussed the same topic. So we were united. Another thing to say is that the project provided very good clarification of declared work. Why is it so important to declare work? Because no changes can take place unless the social dialogue. Well, the social dialogue is still under development in our situation. Since 2022, we've been changing the culture of social dialogue. It's continuous and uninterrupted development, and I hope that this dialogue will evolve to the best model, the model that will fit Ukraine, that will contribute to improving our well-being and welfare. But in the end, I think we will be able to align the positions of the partners. I'm very grateful to you. It was really cool to cooperate with the project. My gratitude extends also to all the colleagues who made their contributions. It's a really great experience. The secretariat employees got to know the models of existing models of social dialogue. We acquired new skills in driving the social dialogue. It was quite a practical experience. It was very useful because the Trilateral Council suspended its activities for some period of time and then it resumed its functioning. So thank you very much for this project. Many thanks to the colleagues who shared their experience. Ms. Natalia, thank you for saying that it was really cool to cooperate with the project, and your speech has also been very cool while being at the same time brief and concise. Many thanks for that. And now we are happy to hand the microphone over to Mr. Sergei Savchuk, the National Coordinator of ILO in Ukraine. He will continue the topic of the labor reform. Thank you. Thank you, Andrei. It's so pleasant to see many familiar faces, and I'm also delighted to see you as moderator of today's event. Dear colleagues, I joined ILO in 2011, many years ago. At the time, in 2001, the work on the new labor code just started. I don't know whether it's good or bad. Unfortunately, after 22 years, we still do not have the new labor code. The title of the project itself, Towards the Safe and a Healthy labor, shows that we have to move along some path, it's a journey, and when we travel, we usually see some road signs demonstrating that we are on the right track. The same is true for the draft making. At the beginning of this session, you saw the milestones behind us on the road towards the legislation which has to approximate Ukraine to standards of the European Union. By approximating to European legislation, we become closer to the membership. We do create conditions continuing the efforts. The project is not going to start and finish and complete all work by itself. The project facilitates the environment in which the experts can work and drive the development of institutional capacities as well as development of the labor legislation. The project provides the technical assistance and makes its contribution to creating such an environment. I think that the project can be characterized by lots of deliverables. I'm not going to reiterate what has already been said, but I think that this project has become a hub for expert knowledge on OSH and other issues. I think it's a fact. And indeed, the project has become a facilitator. Yes, indeed, it created the frame while Ukrainian experts continued the painting. Of course, projects come and go, but the work should be done. Under this project, I think a range of wonderful experts improve their knowledge and gain new skills, and hopefully these experts will continue the efforts. But we needed to make progress, leaving other milestones behind. One of them is the draft law on OSH. It's just a door. It just a door opened for implementing 6 other directives dedicated to the labor relations. But this framework directive should be the first to be implemented. After completing this exercise, other steps related to approximation will be easier. Secondly, I'd like to say that the project was being implemented under very, very tough circumstances. Just imagine, first COVID, then war. So we continuously had to adapt to changing environment. At the same time, the project had to remain relevant, and this required additional, of course, efforts, but I think that the project managed to cope. A couple of words about the psychosocial support component. I think it's a very essential pillar. The ILO managed to address the needs of MHPSS within the labor sector. And let me mention one more important event. ILO made the decision to pass 2 more conventions. And the right to healthy and safe work is included into the fundamental rights in the field of labor. You've got 30 seconds, Sergey. Yes, on your screen you see the proposals of ILO to ratify new modernized conventions to replace the out-of-date conventions, and the Ukraine has to join these conventions. Conventions on OSH number 187 should become fundamental. These conventions actually reflects the Framework Directive number 391. This draft law on OSH is being now considered by Verkhovna Rada, and I think that it will make a decision. We also should not forget key sectors such as agriculture that create lots of jobs. At the same time, such sectors are characterized by a high rate of undeclared work. Undeclared work creates prerequisites for the forced labor. That's why ratification of the 29th Convention also becomes a must-have for a country being member to ILO. Sergey, 30 seconds are over. Yes, finally, just like Antonio, I'm going to extend this 30 seconds, giving them new meaning. Indeed, the projects tend to finish, but they also tend to start. Next year, we are going to launch the country office, and hopefully we will be able to implement new projects via this office. As we heard from Ms. Berezhna, such projects will be highly welcome, and hopefully will be in full capacity to provide our assistance to trilateral partners in developing labor relations in Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Yes, glory to heroes. Thank you, Mr. Sergey, for your historical reference to 2001. You say that it's we do not know whether it's good or bad that we do not have the labor code, but it's good that we still have Sergey, who has been there for 22 years. And here we see some reactions from Ms. Litwin and some other project team members. If you are reading our chat, please keep in mind that Ms. Sofia provides immediate reactions to every speech. So, dear colleagues, we do not see any questions at the moment. Therefore, we are ready to open the second part of our first session, namely dissemination of knowledge and successful practices in the field of OSH. And our first speaker will be Mr. Alexander Ignatov from the SLS. Let me remind you that you've got 5 minutes to take a stand. Of course, all can be interpreted, but please do not misinterpret.
Resolve that on your end while we proceed with an expert. OSH expert. Thank you, colleagues, and I cannot but join and express gratitude to colleagues for the project. But now I have the opportunity to say a couple of words to glorify the project that has been implemented. This has been very important contributions. This is not just something that was just provided for common use. Speaking about myself, the company where I work now, they had a training. They 500 people of the company attended the training. So I was the coordinator, and I include myself, and it is then 501. And these are not only OSH experts. These are people who work with at the front line with people, the everyone who is now implementing these principles in their life. We could see in discussions and questions that were asked to our international colleagues, experts, they were about how the system is developed, how are we supposed to manage it? Because today we really have this component, the European state-of-the-art component, and we got it not from books, but we can hear these best practices from specific people, individuals who implement that. And that's so helpful and that's so interesting. I believe that this approach now makes it possible for us to expand our knowledge and to understand that it's possible to manage safety where you don't have all the answers. Even though we're used to certain systems, it's not bad to share and implement best practices from all over the world. For employers, that's beneficial because responsible businesses, they do not expect for wonders, for miracles. They start by and by developing the systems. Maybe they make mistakes on the way. However, they do not wait for someone to come and resolve that for them. So the seminars that have been held, they were very helpful for the employers who try to implement those practices in their procedures. This is because we are pursuing the path of European integration, and with that, we need to do everything possible now so that when we have full membership status, we didn't have to catch up. So today, responsible, diligent businesses are already doing that. And due to that too, a lot of people could see and hear that, and they start using that. And what has been used is being improved, because this is a continuous process. Studying, it's learning new things. It is an ongoing process, and it's also important to implement this knowledge. And even though I absolutely support this idea that when we sign or approve legislative acts, we need to do that in a dialogical way, but no matter how it is adopted. And of course, I agree that all the parties need to be involved, all the parties need to be heard, and then it's going to be as efficient as possible. But today already, without waiting for that, businesses have started implementing a risk-oriented approach and best practices, because we understand that we need to influence that ourselves. And due to the project, due to the seminars and webinars, I believe we managed to involve such a great number of not only experts, but also those people who directly manage that. So we move on. We do not wait for some outstanding events. We need to do that on the daily basis in the field at the grassroots level. So we are grateful to everyone, to our international colleagues, to our Olga Ivanivna, to the journal, because without that coalition of domestic and international experts, realization of that, the gaps are not that huge, but we are always open to new knowledge and to implementing that wouldn't be possible. So thank you. Look how confident Mr. Ross was, but he had different facial expression. He started in a very serious and energetic way, but at the end we could witness his smile. And that's very symbolic. I have a question to Serhiy. How do you measure efficacy of seminars and webinars? Well, when we had the final phase, and there we had the quiz, and one of employees of the enterprise who is not an OSH engineer, he is a ship leader, she got involved and she won some prizes. And while these are specialized issues, and usually it is experts who need to know that. But now we can see that even people who directly work in industry, they become knowledgeable about that. That's important. So efficiency, it's where it's not just we try to exchange some practices domestically, internally, but it's important to expand that coverage to cover various sectors. Thank you so much, Sergey. Alexander Ignatov representing SLS. Thank you, and sorry for that misfortune. That's a technical issue. But now let me very briefly cover a couple of aspects about the project. The project for me, it has been about changing the philosophy and my very vision of OSH subject. Because at the beginning of working with the project, I thought that labor protection would be okay, but now I realize that labor protection is just a part of the OSH system, and this is to put it briefly. Speaking about practices, about what we do and what we can do under current circumstances. Well, unfortunately, now there is this moratorium on inspection. So mostly what we do is awareness raising, providing advice, consultations for economic entities and employees. We try to do our work to make it more interesting, more accessible. We try to interest people, make employers interested, those employers who are going to invite us for us to hold those awareness raising or educational activities. And we have a couple of new tools that were not used before, thematic trainings with imitation of actual processes. This is like a play where everybody plays his or her own part. And second, we launched it this year, and this is simulation of certain events in the workplace where some accidents happen. So we try to discuss those accidents that and to detect the causes and ways to prevent that. In addition to that, we work to provide technical consultations for employees at their workplaces. We understand that seminars and webinars, that they are good tools that should be used. However, an inspector needs to be at the workplace, and we need to work in the field, and together with employers, we can help them determine some hazards that exist in this or that enterprise. For example, if it is about welding, about electricity, then this is, of course, about hazards, but there are some other additional situations that may be hazardous. And that is why our work in the field at the enterprises, this is, of course, priority for us. And in the context of the war, what has become especially relevant is that now that we have new additional hazards, which we didn't have previously, the war as such, this is about missile attacks, artillery shellings, and other types of circumstances that have been brought by the war. So we understand that amending regulations, it doesn't happen fast because it takes time, and that's normal. So in addition to the suggestions that we develop to amend some legislative documents, in parallel, we develop quite practical recommendations that help employers and employees to organize their work, their processes in safer ways, especially under the current conditions. We try to convey the knowledge to them in a very understandable way. So we avoid formal language. Well, of course, guidelines or guidelines need to meet certain formal requirements. However, sometimes it is too boring to read. It's not engaging at all. That is why when we develop our recommendations, we kind of try to speak human language. So sometimes we try to provide some infographics, some images in order to explain what has been mentioned, what is contained in the narrative part. We try to visualize that and make it user-friendly. We have information portal of SLS that contains a lot of materials that we place there. All of that is readily available, accessible, so both employers and employees can use that without waiting for amendments of legislation, where they could have some official comments or consultations on some particular issues. Another thing I'd like to mention this year, well, actually, this is what we do on the ongoing basis. We always have analyzed our statistics, injury statistics, occupational injuries. And this year, we plan for awareness-raising campaigns. The first and the most important one, I believe, is a campaign about hidden or latent traumatism or injuries. We know that this is a problem in the country because the ratio between fatal injuries and kind of other latent injuries are not in line with the global tendencies. In some sectors, it is 1-to-1, and it is not possible. It is not feasible. So we understand that, and so we focus our campaign on that. And we plan three more campaigns that are going to be focused on specific types of activities. This is field work in the field. Every year when there is harvesting or the agricultural campaign, there are quite a lot of accidents and injuries there. So we pay special attention there and we organize an awareness-raising campaign there. Then we will focus on water supply and sewage sector. There are also quite a lot of hazards, and of course, construction. We understand that now the enemy is destroying the enemy, while us, we have to rebuild the these assets. And as mentioned today, there is the problem issue of informal labor in construction sector, and of course that's an important factor of lack of safety. So we decided to focus on that, and we subdivide that. And you have 30 seconds. Okay, thank you. So we have set some deadlines. For these campaigns, we try to logically cover the needs. If it is about agricultural field work, we start in late February and also in the harvesting season. If it is about water supply and sewage, we focus on the warm periods of the time, warm season. So this is briefly about achievements in our work. We're so grateful to the project for this collaboration, and I'm grateful to all SLS colleagues who help us to implement these recommendations. I'm grateful to social partners, to colleagues who are continuously involved into our cause, and this is reducing the level of occupational injuries. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. You tried to do your best and you succeeded. And also you said that you had some technical issues at the beginning, but let me mention that we can see, based on your example, how it is possible to quickly overcome any technical issues. Thank you. Okay, and now in the framework of the same section, OSH, Mr. Matvichuk, Ochrona Pracy. Thank you, Andrei, and I'm happy to welcome you too in our community because you are our ally. We have had frequent meetings and we are always happy to witness your professional work. Speaking about this event, well, frankly speaking, well, closing the project or project closing event, this is a bad name because you never close anything. We have given the impetus to the processes that cannot be closed, you know. So today we have to speak about some lessons learned and about next steps. I look forward to next steps, to some prospective activities, and I've heard some of the ideas already. And I'd like to address Antonia, Zsolt, Sofia, and express my gratitude to you because we've been working so hard, and we were really a team, and this is a team that was able to demonstrate good practices, standards of communication, of training. It was so comprehensive on all parts of the process, and that's cool. While Ochrona Pracy magazine well, we try to describe that and to make it history now. So I see that I still have some time, so let me briefly mention some achievements. So the achievement, so the OSH experts, a community of OSH experts have been developed in Ukraine, and these are people who are ready to work under the new realities. There have been a lot of practical activities, a lot of relevant interventions, and a huge number of people covered. This is about the practical work. And of course, the political will of our parties to social dialogue has been shaped. The project allocated some energy and time to build into the system to organize various activities, drawing contests, student festival, and interventions on work at high. And you focused on so many important aspects. And I believe that Ukraine has finally made its strategic choice in the field of risk management, in contrast versus the regulatory management of the sector. And now we speak not so much about labor protection, but about OSH. So this is about a change of concept as well. So I understand that the project stays with us and we know where to go, how to go, and the answers to these questions have been given in our collaboration with the project. And let me remind you a little bit about the history. On the 13th of December 2013, the first conference was held by Ochrona Pracy magazine. More than 10 specialists of SLS participated, and we discussed risk management. And we never delineated risks and hazards. But now the situation is different, but 10 years have passed.
Тільки рівно 13 грудня 12 місяця
So
18
on the 14th of December 2018, in 5 years after that, the concept of a labor protection system transformation was adopted. But what else? We would like to have a little bit more. We would like to have a law. Unfortunately, the law has not been adopted yet, but it's not a negative situation. It will happen in a due time. Let me also say a couple of words about the project itself, and about its cherry on the cake, namely 7 technical webinars arranged and held by the project, our magazine, and the OSH community. 7 webinars on working in the wells, safe handling the machines and hazardous substances, and all the rest. So what is the result? The result is a huge library full of video and digital materials. Everything can be easily accessed, so it's a great job. Andrei asked us about efficiency. Andrei, the efficiency of this webinar can be expressed by over 7,100 passed tests. 6,000 of them were passed successfully. So here is the proof of efficiency. We were trained by international experts. At the same time, our national experts demonstrated their high level. In some issues, our experts are even better than the European ones because we have deep knowledge of our context and we know our field. So here you see what tasks still lie ahead of us. Project managers always found a space for us during all their events. They have been supporting us. And let me also disclose the final interview with Mr. Zholt in the most recent copy of the magazine. He asks even he answers even some philosophical questions. So please read this magazine. But of course, on the 22nd of April, we will be with the project again. Personally, our magazine published lots of interviews related to the project. So it's not the close of the project, it's just the suspension. And the labor safety magazine, labor protection magazine, has now European level trainers on OSH. It's a very important achievement, and we have to provide an inventory of all our achievements. So these are our tasks. Thank you very much. We'll be victorious, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you very much, Dmytro, as the real editor-in-chief. He immediately focused on the title. This is the person who cares of the magazine, and that's why the editor-in-chief made an effort to popularize, instead of saying to advertise, the magazine. And we are very delighted to see that the inspiration will never exhaust in the magazine. And of course, let's refer to Ms. Litvin, who sent a message saying that this is a magazine starting with the capital letter. After Mr. Matveychuk, we cannot, of course, close this part of the session. Mr. Dudash will rescue me. He is willing to make a comment or ask a question. Zsolt?
Thank you very much. Indeed, I will not take too much of your time. A very quick comment only before the coffee break, because you will mind that I'm taking precious time away from your tea, coffee, or stretching your legs. In the chat, there was also reference to a very dear colleague, an outstanding person, and someone who has given a huge contribution to the whole issue of occupational safety and health. And I wanted personally to raise this in the topic, not only in the chat. We're talking about Yuri Kozovoy, who has been an etalon of dedication, commitment, and very special expertise. I spend hours of passionate discussions about little details. And let me reassure you, this is a person who deeply cares, who deeply loves the topic. And I wanted to give my personal recognition, if I may, for his outstanding achievement in this field before we take the coffee break. I'm sorry if I have abused the time, Chairperson. Please, Andrei, the floor is back to you. Thank you.
No, you have not abused, you have thriftily used the time. І Жолт Дудаш вклався в 1 хвилину, дякую. І він же ж нам...
You spent just 1 minute speaking. Thank you very much. And Zsolt actually gave us an instruction. And of course, we have our own ideas of the future achievements. Ukraine is moving towards such achievements as safe and healthy and declared work. So with this introduction, we can easily proceed to the next session. It will be dedicated to reducing the rate of undeclared work. It's one of the priorities. And again, you see the quote from the former ILO Director General, Francis Blanchard, who said that the labor legislation without inspection is an exercise in ethics, but not a socially binding discipline. It was not by accident that I said international organization for rights. We know about the right to the safe work, decent work. Decent work is the right of person. It's indispensable. And now it's high time for animated infographics. We frequently mentioned the metaphor of picture we are going to paint. we are still not clear about its genre, yet infographics, animated infographics is a very clear genre. So labor inspection outcome, system of continuous training for inspectors, universal labor inspector, regular thematical campaigns, annual plans for reducing undeclared work, sustainable partnership, millions of people informed about undeclared work, over 600,000 workers were employed officially after 2020, better counseling function of the SLS, and SLS focuses on the key functions of the labor inspection, and it's able to fully implement the respective ILO conventions. So, dear participants, hopefully you managed to read the text on the slides. These are the guidelines for our discussion. First of all, I would like to hand it over to our next speaker. Don't forget about 5 minutes to speak. Mr. Roman Poklonsky from the Ministry of Economy, over to you. Good afternoon, dear participants. There are so many of you today. What can I say? Of course, it's a very positive sign. What can I say about labor inspection? In line with the association agreement, Ukraine has embarked on a commitment to gradually harmonize its legislation with the legislation and the practice of the European Union. Association agreement has been mentioned many times today when we discussed the draft law on OSH. However, we've got the second as important draft law on labor. It's been discussed for over 20 years. It must be implemented in the national legislation. And this draft law will include 2 ILO conventions, number 81 and number 129. You know what these conventions are about. First, these conventions had to be included into the draft law on OSH, and then something went wrong. I don't know whether it's good or not, but now these conventions are going to be covered by the draft law on labor. This draft law will will bring forth the functions of the labor inspections, rights and duties of the inspectors, and the measures that they can take in case of identifying the labor legislation violations. So it was in very rough terms, but now let's get closer to labor inspection. Inspection is the service function of the state, and the labor inspector should be trained. The knowledge should be verified, and the inspector should be, of course, tested or accredited. I think that an inspector is a white-collar employee having a tablet, which will be enough to conduct all the inspection visits and ensure safe labor. Inspectors will be able also to identify undeclared work. In terms of the information system existing in being developed in the SLS, this topic is not abandoned. Donors invest money in Ukraine, and personally, I raised this topic on information system again, and I demonstrated the previous achievements to the leadership of the Ministry of Economy as well as donors. Hopefully, very soon we will be able to resuscitate this activity. Information is needed for surveillance, for control over the occupational injuries. The current information system should be in line with the modern level of information technologies. This is a very important topic we are discussing with the SLS, and very soon you will see the new draft law covering the issues of the inspections. That's it from me. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Poklonsky. You see that you had a plan to share your vision of the future, and you did it. Now I'm looking at this definition, universal inspector, labor inspector. It has a hue of artificial intelligence. However, we are talking about people with their responsibilities, with their skills and knowledge. One of these people is Mr. Igor Degnera. Igor Degnera, over to you from this. Thank you, Andrei. Welcome, everyone. First of all, of course, I would like to express gratitude to the project team, Antonio, Jolt, and Sophia, as well, team members who we do not see every time during meetings. Nonetheless, we know that on their shoulders, a huge portion of work is delivered. It's quite a difficult task. It's not a mean feat to reach a consensus, to align different opinions. We often have to work under such circumstances.
For the slideshow, I enjoyed following it because for actually this several minutes of photos cover years of hard work. And this is the work, the outcomes that we can discuss today. And it did fly like a minute. And today we refer to the past. And let me add then to the previous mentions of the OSH draft law, even in the end of 2016, and we continued in 18, SLS started working on the draft in 18. The government adopted the concept for SLS reform. So for 5 years now we have this guideline, and this concept paper was approved without any comments by trade unions, by employers. So then every party could see very clearly the need and the vector of further movement of developing the action plan for the draft law, which is still relevant today, because the main and the first actually item of the action plan was adoption of OSH law. So unfortunately, it still has not been implemented. So going back to the topic of our today's discussion, SLS and regulatory framework, having certain background, 20 years have passed since ratification of Conventions 81 and 129 of ILO, but unfortunately, as well as in the case of the Labor Code, we have declared our vision and our desire to implement that, but we have not yet practically implemented that. And the legislative framework, this is the basis for our work. Without it, we won't be able to move further. However, under our current conditions, we are used to working not due to something, but in spite of the obstacles. And of course, our objective is to develop the labor inspection system as well, I could describe it in a couple of words. This is a timely and high-tech service that is able to prevent the violation of rights of employees at work. And this is something that implies a lot of routine work to organize internal processes of the service interaction with our international and domestic and social partners. And here it is hard to overestimate the project's contribution, because a lot of objectives have been achieved, and that's about development of the ongoing continuous training system for labor inspectors, and this is key. Currently, we have the sustainable mechanism of ongoing training and increased knowledge of inspectors, and without that implementation of this artificial intelligence, as Andrei mentioned, universal inspector who will cover to the extent possible the aspects of compliance with workers' rights at work. So without that, it will hardly be possible. If we speak about organizing work of labor inspectorate, we are communicating with the project and we are working with them. And I would like to share my vision about that. For me, that's about significant assistance by the project. I mean, for me, the project is like a treasure box of best experience, of best knowledge, and the best practices of the most advanced EU member states. And we are very grateful for your swift responses and when you respond to our queries or some ideas and invitations to discuss some issues, looking for ways to resolve the issues. That's a point of communication with the respective inspectorates. And due to the project, we managed to have these discussions, and we participated in the European platform to combat undeclared labor. Last year, we even implemented simultaneous campaigns with European labor inspectorates to counteract human trafficking and undeclared labor, in particular in agriculture. So I believe that the legislative framework that we lack today, and that was actually in line with the legislative framework that of efficient, advanced labor inspectorates globally, that's something that guides us towards the goal of developing the kind of inspection as I've described. So I believe that we will be looking forward to development of legislative initiatives and their discussion, because without that, we can hardly expect efficient and fast moving forward. Regarding reconstruction and, well, due to the project and ongoing debates regarding the mandate of SLS and contribution by social partners, well, based on all of that, I understand that maybe there is insufficient understanding of internal processes, why labor inspectorate works that way, why we have those priorities, and why we plan our work that way. I believe that was quite an efficient step that has been made, that we implemented an ongoing working group, tripartite working group, and there on the annual basis, we decide on the key issues in the field of labor legislation, violation of labor rights of workers, and in consultations with employers and employees, we develop the plans, we set, highlight the issues, we determine our KPIs and goals. In consultations on the tripartite basis, we've developed a strategy to overcome, to combat undeclared labor, and I believe that that's a guarantee of our further movement that will make it possible to further determine why we need to develop that legislative framework and why it's going to be efficient. I'm grateful to employers and trade unions because in the context of the aspect of undeclared labor, I believe that finally we've arrived at certain understanding why that issue is important and how it is necessary to coordinate our joint efforts. So thank you, colleagues. This is a very interesting event. Thank you. And you have contributed to making it interesting and helpful. Thank you, Ihor. And we proceed with SLS, and we will hear about evolution in a reduction of undeclared labor, and that's going to be Mr. Honcharuk. Hello, dear colleagues, Andrei, everyone present. You know, I was preparing for this event, and I paid attention to the name of the project, towards safe and declared labor in Ukraine. And I wanted to say undeclared. For some reason, this is my like slip of the tongue. And well, I analyzed the work of Labor Inspectorate over the years, during the years that I've been working in the system, and that's 15 years now. So I started as an ordinary labor inspector. I worked in the field. I detected the employees who were unregistered, undeclared, and by, I reached the central level, and now I'm head of the structural unit that deals with provision with enforcement of labor legislation. And now, analyzing all of these previous years, I understand what is important for a labor inspector, for a field worker, and what's important and required for the labor inspectors who are working at the central level and who plan the work. And I realized that for all of us, it is important that apart from the knowledge, so we mentioned that knowledge is important for a qualified labor inspector, but also it is important for them to be able to implement this knowledge, to convey that to the employers and employees that you deal with. And it is also important to have some technical capacity, even some handouts that you could bring to employers or employees to because it is easier for them to perceive information visually. And leadership of SLS needs to plan properly and to inform about their activity. So when the project started working, started operating, their approaches to work with the labor inspectorate changed. What Ihor Anatolyevich has mentioned already, we revised our approach to our work with shifting from controlling to preventive attitude. And now it is even our slogan, the slogan of Labor Inspectorate has changed. It used to be control and inform, and now it is consult and inform, and then we control. So it happened so that at the beginning of the war, we actually had already some preventive material, some materials in place that made it possible for us to raise awareness and to do prevention work. In parallel, there has been this project, and implementers of the project always responded to all of our ideas. They immediately responded to us, and they provided us with technical support. This includes the work on our 4 awareness raising campaign, Go to the Light, preventing human trafficking. Ukraine is working, and we have already developed a communication campaign for the future and for post-war value each everyone, and we are very grateful there. The project also helped us develop the national action plan to reduce the undeclared labor, and they helped us to develop communication strategy. They helped our communication experts and the officials who work there to adequately write the news and press releases. And it was very relevant that in the war, in the period of the war, 20 trainers, labor inspectors, 20 labor inspectors have been trained as trainers on psychosocial support, and there has been a range of webinars, and we're very grateful there, especially to Antonia, to Zsolt, to project leaders, and we're especially grateful to Sophia. At any time, it could be early morning or even late at night, she was always in touch, and she provided us with feedback, and she always supported us in all of our initiatives. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Volodymyr, for your very optimistic perspective, and for that everyone has heard words of gratitude. And now we mentioned a Ukrainian Student Festival of Advertising, Yevhen Romat, on developing the culture of declaring labor among students. Thank you, Andrei. I'd like to clarify that I'm head of the Society of Community of Advertisers in Ukraine, and these festivals are a sign or a result of our activity. I've been working with the project since 2020, and that's my honor. And actually, I would like to mention several mini projects. A sustainable collaboration in the framework of the 11th Festival of Social Advertising. This is an advanced festival, and 15th, 16th, and 17th student festivals for advertising. So I'd like to express my personal opinion, but I believe that the problem of undeclared labor and safe labor has been covered in the Ukrainian society insufficiently, to an insufficient extent. And why I believe so? Because a lot of students that have participated, and this is a variety of students, they change. They apply for universities on the annual basis. For quite a lot of them, this was a new issue, and they didn't see it before. So I believe that it makes a lot of sense. It's very relevant that the project paid attention to collaboration with the future managers of Ukrainian enterprises that are students now. Due to our collaboration, only in partnership nominations that were launched by the project, there participated more than 750 students, and the total number of participants in all nominations, in all categories, in partner festivals amounted to 1,500. And if you add the number of those people who were present at all of those events, that would be more than 4,000. Those were very interesting events, and they were quite popular. These were launch ceremonies and award ceremonies, a number of webinars and master classes. I would like to particularly mention the lectures by project managers at universities. Antonia Santos managed to visit the audience of one of the universities before the lockdown, the pandemic. So the total number of Ukrainian universities that have been presented at partner festivals was 89, and that was universities, high institutions from all regions of Ukraine, from Donetsk and Luhansk regions to Transcarpathian region. And if you add to the statistics, press releases in the media and in social media, the total audience of our joint projects then would be measured in dozens of thousands. And maybe I have exhausted you with figures, but of course figures are important, quantitative figures. But what's even more important is quality, results and outcomes of our collaboration. And here we need to specifically emphasize that for many participants who have participated in partner nominations, these nominations became the first source of information about the standards regarding declared and safe labor. When working on the festival submissions, it took them several months. We announced the nomination usually in June, while the festivals were held in November or December. And in the course of that, the students creatively revised the standards of declared and safe labor. Mr. Ignatov mentioned in his intervention before the break that sometimes OSH guidelines are boring. And sorry, still, since I represent the advertising sector, I could add that unfortunately, the posters and handouts for OSH may also look quite boring. But some some student works that were submitted for festivals were kind of sort of masterpieces. And I hope that representatives of the project that were
Вже яскраві творчі,
members of the
можна
festival
казати,
jury, they will
вже мають
confirm that. And creative, outstanding pieces have a significant effect on the beneficiary. This is not boring. And these advertising pieces are well remembered by the audience, and they are more convincing.
де
I'd like, of course, to recognize the importance of the topic. I would like to discuss with you a legal framework. It's an extremely relevant topic. However, as a representative of the media, I'm the editor-in-chief of the magazine Marketing and Advertising since 1996. As a lecturer at the Taras Shevchenko University, I am sure that our society should recognize at all levels the importance of the proper regulation. I am sure that everyone present here takes it for granted. It's an axiom which should not be proven. Actually, I teach social marketing and marketing in public administration. It is also important to apply the mechanisms of social marketing and advertising, like it or not. Not everyone likes advertising, but sometimes such promotion is quite useful. What else I would like to emphasize? The participants of festivals won't violate the labor legislation, and they will prevent their employees and employers from such violations. You've got 36 seconds left. Okay. And let me also mention the personal position of the project managers. Here I agree with the rest of the participants. Personally, I cooperated with these people, and these people not just meticulously deliver their job, but they live in what they are doing. During the project, I met all the key persons, Antonio, Sofia, and Joel, and I can say that these are people who found themselves, who complete their job. I wish you lots of success. Mr. Dmitro Matvichuk criticized a little bit the title to today's event, but I can propose my own idea, successful closing of the project. Thank you very much. I'm not an editor-in-chief. However, I can also offer an idea, successful closure of a development stage. So it's not the end, of course. Thank you for your advertising of the festival. Once again, we do not see any comments or questions. This means that we can start our third session entitled Joint Response to the War Challenges. And Antonio is asking for the floor. Hold on a second. Antonio, yes, I see your hand. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I just want to make a comment in what I heard about labor inspection. Just to share with you that when I arrived in Ukraine in 2017, I had a lot of discussions with government officials, colleagues from the labor inspector. I'm a labor inspector myself, and I could feel the frustration of the labor inspectors about, and they don't complain. They did not complain, you know. They are very dedicated, but I felt their frustration about the lack of powers to discharge their duties. So they see the situations, but they cannot really intervene, and that is really frustrating. And I just want to, I heard what our colleagues said, the importance of the knowledge, the importance of the IT system, the importance of having laptops during inspection visits, the relevance of training. That is all important, of course. And I also heard the concept of changing from control, the focus on control to the focus on informing. But I'm a very stubborn person. I'm in the sense that I'm very determined, you know, and that's why I'm making this intervention. Also to point it out, something that I think it's crucial. And that is that, as we all know, there are three main functions of a labor inspection system, one of which is providing technical information and advice to employers and workers. What was mentioned by Goncharu, and very well. Also, to support or to contribute to improve the legislation and to bridge some gaps on the legislation. But there is another one, which is very important also, which is control and enforce the legal provisions. And that is also crucial. And that is difficult still in Ukraine. And as we have seen before in the presentation that passed, without enforcement, legislation the activity of labor inspection is an exercise that is not binding and that does not have consequences, meaning that without proper enforcement, legislation are intentions, are just pieces of paper. That is why it is important that labor inspectors, besides these material needs like laptops, IT system, knowledge base, and trainings and capacity building, which is important, they have to have the means, the legal means to change the workplaces for the better. And that is, the basis of that is that it should be foreseen on the legislation, the powers of the labor inspectors to make inspection visits without prior notice. For example, it cannot be, a labor inspection system cannot be effective if there is a moratorium on inspection visits. It just can't. And especially in times of war, in times of COVID, is when the employers and the workers more need labor inspectors. So there should be no moratorium, because the fact that there is a moratoria is based on the perception, the wrong perception and assumption that labor inspector is not good for business. So let's protect business from labor inspection, which is a mistake. Because labor inspectors are there to serve workers and employers equally. They are there to inform, to support, to share experience, to share good practices. That is the labor inspection that I envision for Ukraine, and that I hope that you really do it. So that is the challenge that I leave to you, because labor inspection is indeed good for business and is good for the workers, obviously, also. So there is no need to protect the businesses from the labor inspection. No, there is no need for such procedures. And again, labor inspection has three functions. It cannot work just to apply two functions. So let's give these guys the means to improve working conditions in Ukraine. Thank you. Over to you, Kulikov. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. I think that we saw that not only you are stubborn in the sense of insistent, but also eloquent and passionate. And we accept your challenge, I think. Thank you very much. And тепер ми переходимо до нашої
Okay, now let's proceed our third session. It's even more informative than the previous ones, because it will be about joint response to address new challenges arising in Ukraine nowadays. And we will show you some slides. So this first slide is to demonstrate you the quote: "You and I, the ILO, must recognize that the struggle we are in is not merely against evil, but for better days and better time to come." This statement was made at the International Labour Conference in 1941. It sounds extremely relevant today. Before we start discussion, let's watch animated infographics reflecting the events throughout the past year. Ukraine without forced labor. At least 4 million people learned about the risks of forced labor and trafficking in persons due to the SLS campaigns. Ukrainian employers promote the guiding principles of forced labor prevention. Psychosocial support at work. The tools have been tested and then ready for use. Decent work and social justice. Decent work and social justice. Maybe some of you may ask, what are you talking about? The most important thing is what's happening now at the front line, but everything is intertwined, believe me, and the host of the conference has offered such title to our third session. And now let me hand it over to Mr. Hanenko from the Employers Organization. And glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes, glory to both male and female heroes. Dear participants of today's event, welcome everyone. Welcome to this exchange of opinions on the previous events and the future achievements. I'm the representative of the Employers Organization headed by Mr. Kinach. Personally, I present the employers in the healthcare sector. We joined the project quite recently. Our team is constituted by nearly 50 players representing 59 healthcare facilities of Ukraine. Hopefully, this team reinforced the activities helped to address the problems which existed before war and rise during war. And another problem to touch upon is future recovery of Ukraine in the post-war period. We joined the project during the practical implementation of some activities. In particular, I'm talking about psychosocial support practices implemented at some companies. Many thanks to Mr. Savchuk, to Ms. Sofia Litvin-Santos, to Ms. Zolto Dunas, to Ms. Ksenia Lepecha. Due to their efforts, we gained a huge volume of knowledge and skills. These skills have come handy for our team and generally the employers organization. In the local context at our companies, we've come up with an algorithm of implementing a real social dialogue dedicated to the topic of psychosocial support at work. The substantial part of this work is absolutely crucial. Mental health, social support, physical health are all functions existing in the context. They require popularization and mainstreaming and promotion, because only due to proper acknowledgement, the country on the whole and the workers in particular can address the challenges. It is absolutely clear that the partnership with the labor protection component is absolutely crucial. I'm grateful to SLS for approximating us to signing the memorandum on cooperation. By this memorandum, we recognize de facto our joint vision of the problems people have to face with during exercising their professional duties. At the same time, we have to scale up our activities. What's the purpose? What's the overall purpose? The development of Ukraine in terms of economic development and in terms of increasing labor productivity. Hopefully, in the nearest future, Ukraine will be victorious in this war, and in the nearest future, we will face with the objective of the country's rehabilitation and development. In this context, psychosocial aspects will play the key role, because social justice, peace, and solidarity in the state building process are the topics for the social dialogue. Currently, we are in the preparatory stage, and after this stage, I'm sure we will continue cooperation, our cooperation. We are absolutely delighted by our partnership with Sergei Petrovich, Ksenia, Zholt, Sofia, and the other team members. Svetoslav, you have 30 seconds. I hope that we will find the formats and the mechanisms to implement skills and knowledge we've acquired. Thus, we will be able to make progress in the interest of the society and the social partners. Glory to Ukraine, glory to male and female heroes. And okay, let's go on. Let's stick to our agenda. With that, I'd like to pass the floor to Mr. Rodin Kolishko from the Employers Federation. His topic is prevention of forced labor and trafficking in persons. So what is the contribution of employers? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrei, and welcome. I would like to pass regards from the president of the Confederation, Mr. Miroshnichenko, to all the participants, and I would like to express significant level of satisfaction, but also our sadness, because today we are not launching but closing the ILO project. And for 3 years, we've been observing evolution of the project. We were involved in actually all of the activities, almost all of the activities of the project. And it's sad to wrap that up, to wrap up this phase of the project, because we look forward to the next phase. Couple of words about the theme that I would like to cover. We are grateful to the project for your flexibility, and that apart from those aspects that form the basis and the key mandate of the project also allocated sufficient attention to some aspects that probably do not form the direct basis mandate of the project, but that are closely linked, and prevention of human trafficking and forced labor. Now, we approach this issue after the onset of the war, when ILO addressed us in spring, and they said, do you do something about that issue as employers? Do you work, deal with your European colleagues, those companies that employ your citizens and refugees? We said, no, we have other priorities, the war, which is still a priority, of course, but back then it was so stressful and relevant. And we said that maybe Ukrainian business, it is not relevant for Ukrainian business now. But we realized that it was a mistake. It was our mistake. So we decided to consult with our companies, with our businesses. And they said that the issue is very relevant. And as a result, we implemented this mini project, which we started last year in November. And it was completed with development and presentation of guidelines for employers to prevent human trafficking and forced labor. It was presented in December last year, and it was further developed. It is now further developed, I mean, this project, because now we work on the initiative that appeared in the previous phase, the initiative of launching the movement Ukraine without forced labor. Together with SLS, and we are grateful to them, we are developing certain mechanisms that would stimulate responsible businesses in Ukraine to comply not only with legislative principles in the field of prevention of forced labor, but also we try to go further to cover fields of voluntary responsibilities. In particular, we cover aspects of corporate social responsibility, but we try to do our best so that Ukrainian businesses were not caught in the trap of risky challenges after the war is over, after we continue our work with European partners, and they will ask this question to us: how did you survive in that difficult time? Whether you were guided by the international legislation and domestic legislative principles. They are not that easy. It's not that easy to implement them. They need to be implemented transposed in Ukrainian legislation and enforce them in our realities. We need to raise awareness about forced labor, about various types of it, how actually diverse and treacherous that is, because sometimes some things that are very far from our general idea of forced labor, where people are handcuffed and made to work, of course. So we are grateful to our colleagues, to our partners from other business associations. They are disseminating this information, they participate in our activities, and we hope that this initiative will continue and develop, because the activities that we are developing with SLS, of course, they need to be piloted in the situation in Ukraine in this period of development. And so we very much hope that we will be able to continue this work. And let me also wish us all peace and all the best, and congratulations on the upcoming holidays, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. And Rodion, when such a person, the person who represents this organization in this tone, expresses some hopes, it gives me some assurance. So now we look forward to a very interesting intervention on behalf of the Federation of Trade Unions of Ukraine, Katerina Voloshka, on raising awareness on the risks of human trafficking and forced labor. Hello, can you hear me? We can hear you well. We see your screen as well. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And I see one of the slides that I wanted to share with you on the screen. So a year has passed since we launched the awareness raising campaign to inform the public about risks of human trafficking and forced labor. In March 2022, in the course of discussions with representatives of ILO that initiated this information campaign, we discussed that probably we need, to the extent possible, to disseminate this information, to disseminate the messages that warn Ukrainians, in particular women who massively fled from Ukraine with their children, fled from the war, to inform them about risks of forced labor. And it happened so that back then we decided on sharing these messages via monitors on intercity trains, because in this way we directly address our target audience. So we contacted the head of Youth Council of the Association of Railway Company Workers. So we agreed that with the railways, and quite quickly we launched this awareness raising campaign. We tried to do everything as fast as possible because a lot of women with their children had to flee at the beginning of the war. Hundreds of thousands of women and girls crossed the border, in particular by traveling on trains. Unfortunately, that was a crisis situation, which made our citizens especially vulnerable. On the border, in most countries where those women traveled, there were some recruiters and fraudsters who try to use that information and use that situation, and they would kidnap children or involve women in social exploitation. To avoid that, we launched that information campaign to inform Ukrainians about the key security rules for Ukrainians abroad. And here you can see photos on intercity train. Could you please go on, switch to the next slide? So these are the screens. You can see slides on the screens on the trains. In particular, this is a short message, straightforward rules, how to keep that you should keep your documents, that you should stay in groups, you should travel in the tested way, you shouldn't trust strangers. So on the 4th of April last year, this information appeared on screens of intercity trains that travel abroad. And this is a static slide that stays on the screen for 14 seconds, which is 2 times more than standard advertising time. And in 2022, the information was broadcasted 6 to 7 times during the trip. Due to Ukrzaliznytsia, Ukrainian Railways, this was free of charge for us, and we are grateful to them. And since on average the carriages, the trains were 60% full, we covered more than 1.2 million people last year. And also 10 days after we launched the information campaign on the screens, we decided to support that with posters, which were placed in passenger trains all over, and also in all carriages of intercity fast trains. In intercity trains, we actually placed the same slide but printed out, and that was done by trade union of railway employees with the support of the initiative. So we also placed that on passenger train, same information, but in a bit different format. Kiev Regional Trade Union Council and a Council of Youth Trade Unions and Light Duty Trade Organization joined to finance this part of the campaign. All of these components were parts of the campaign that is ongoing, but since February this year, we have scaled it down. So mostly we now cover the trains that go abroad. only, because unfortunately the war was ongoing. Women still travel abroad. Now the wave is not that huge, but we understand that the risks are still there. So I'd like to express gratitude to ILO for this very important initiative for the Ukrainian society. Thank you for your work. On my behalf, I'd like to express gratitude to Youth Council of Trade Union of Railways worker who actually supported and promoted promotion of these messages free of charge voluntarily. Thank you for your attention and have good holidays. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you, Katarina. And of course, when I travel inside in the country, when I take intercity trains, I do see your posters, which are so important because today this train goes abroad, but tomorrow it will travel inside of the country. So sometimes the effect is bigger than you imagine, I believe. Thank you. And now Olga Bogdanova, European Labor OSH community. This is about OSH in war and post-war period, new challenges, due response. You're welcome. Hello, dear colleagues. Mr. Dudas even have confirmed that with their gestures. So, Sophia, sorry, I will disclose this secret, but several days ago, I was preparing for this meeting. I talked to Sophia, and in her voice, I could hear some tears. I also became tearful. This is because the project is running out, is ending. But due to the project, we know about psychosocial support, that you should not restrain your emotions, you should release them. And now it is the opportunity for us to release something, to express gratitude to each other. Especially, I am grateful to ILO project because they have set up this platform where all of us have got to know each other better. We've started working closer. And believe me, I am just an ordinary OSH engineer, and imagine how higher the status of the head of SLS is, or some colleagues from the Ministry of Economy. So even though we have very different status, we work together, we developed this collaboration, and as a result, we developed the document that I'm so proud of, and I believe that all of us will be proud of it. It is not perfect yet. We've just started this work, but I'm sure that it is unprecedented. And this is the document. This is a set of practices and approaches that have been tested, that prove that they can save people in times of the war. And this is OSH at work in war and post-war period, experience of Ukraine in the situation of full-scale aggression. And by the way, we had a lot of debates on the title of the document. And an important role was that of SLS, and thank you, colleagues, that you've come up with very important comments, and you've really helped us improve this document, and I'm grateful to my colleagues. Please show the photos now, because I'd like to really celebrate these people. When we developed this document, we started developing it early last year.
Наприклад, це був час
And that was the time when the colleagues had to evacuate themselves from Mariupol or Severodonetsk. And back then, we decided that we need to take note of that, to document that. And that experience of relocation of enterprises or shelters, that we had to include psychosocial support activities, that we had to implement, all of that experience has been covered here. And let me mention the colleagues. So 5 active OSH engineers, experts, and medical expert, Ms. Bilko, then 3 PhD people, 2 people with international professional education. And this document is truly worth being proud of. And there is already demand. On the 3rd and 4th of May, we are going to hold an international conference, mostly involving Balkan countries, also some African countries. So there will be information and the access will be free. And there I will speak and present this document. I will comment on what we discovered as OSHA experts in the context of the war. There is very high level of interest. People say they need that and they're grateful that we've prepared this document. For the first time, we will speak about hierarchy of risk control, which is so well familiar to us, but applied to the situation of a war. For the first time, we will share SLS experience that will be helpful to other countries as well, because this kind of advice on the experience of reallocation, that's very helpful for our experience will be helpful for other countries. And this is just the start of our work. And after the project is wrapped up, this will be a test for us. This period will be a test for us, whether we will be able to stick to that dialogue, if we will be able to work together as we worked with the support of ILO. Thank you, and I hope that we will go on. Thank you so much. And I always advise not to start with the word whether, because when you say whether, you say yes or no without making this question open. But based on what you have said, Olga, my answer to your question starting with whether is yes. So, colleagues, now we have successfully completed our third session, and the part of the session where we had discussion on psychosocial support, psychosocial assistance at the workplace, risks of human trafficking and forced labor. And now let us hear findings of independent project assessment. Assessment expert, Mr. Tama Vasser. The floor is yours, because one thing is to hear feedback from participants, people involved into the project, but another thing is to hear findings of the independent assessment. And here I pass the floor to Mr. Tama.
Dear Andrei, thank you very much. Dobro ranko svima. Thanks for making the time and to give me the opportunity to introduce the results of the independent evaluation I have been conducting. I will just very briefly start by introducing myself. Well, actually, you probably have discussed with me already, because I've had the chance to exchange with most of you, and I was pleased to see you again and to listen to you this morning. Actually, so I've been conducting an independent evaluation of this phase, but I've also had the privilege to evaluate the previous phase of this project. So that was for me really interesting to see how things had been changing over a period of time that actually extends over close to 6 years. So basically, I'll be covering today the objective of the evaluation. I will have a quick word about the methodology and the key steps of the evaluation process. Then I will introduce or present the key findings from this assignment. I will also follow the logic of the conclusions, lessons learned, and best practices identified from the key findings. And then I will introduce with you the recommendations that are formulated based on the consultations from the interviews and from the documentation review. And then hopefully there will be a bit of time, if I stick to the timing that I'm being allocated today, to answer questions that you may have. So basically, the objective, an evaluation, as you may know, is, I would say, almost a standard exercise that comes at the middle, and actually there was a mid-term evaluation for this project, as you may remember, and this one was the final. Overall, it's to assess the performance of the project, but I would say not only the performance, it's also an opportunity to review whether the project was aligned to the priority of the country, and especially, in the context of Ukraine with the dramatic development of the war, whether the project was also relevant to the new change that occurred more than a year ago. It also involves to determining the effectiveness of the project, the efficiency in implementation. So again, adjusting to the, I've obviously, mentioned the war, but also previous to that, the pandemic that occurred before the war broke out. And that will also covers the short-term impact and the projections for the expected longer-term impact, and finally the sustainability of the results achieved to date. So briefly about the methodology, a standard when evaluating a project is to, especially from key donors such as the European Union, is to use the OECD evaluation criteria. Actually, in the case of this project, there's been 7 criteria that actually are based on OECD, but let's say reformulated by the ILO. So that includes the relevance and the strategic fit of the project. As a number 2, the coherence and the validity of the design of the project. Then the third criteria is the effectiveness and the progress, in this case, achieved by the end of the project. The fifth one is the effectiveness and of the management arrangement. And the sixth one is about measuring the impact, and the seventh one is about the sustainability. In terms of key steps, so basically, typically an evaluation covers, the first phase is about developing the methodology, the tools, the data collection tools, and review the limitations. In this case, obviously, the limitation was that the evaluation was conducted remotely because of the war, the ongoing war in Ukraine. And hopefully, I have to say, and I'm actually personally very grateful to all of you, because all of the stakeholders have confirmed their availability. I've also, received a great support from the team to manage a large number of interviews. Actually, the interview phase stretched from the 6th to the 23rd of February. And I have to say that, everything went really, really well. And I'm grateful for really the time that you have all made to not only listen to my question, but really engage into very deep conversations. So I'm really grateful to you for that. And then, so that's the key steps, once again, is reviewing the documentation. I would say the central and the crucial phase is the interviews, because this is where I really get the critical thinking based on your experience and actually beyond the project years of commitment into reforming labor inspections in OSH. And then the final phase is about drafting the evaluation report that has been completed very recently. And that is the evaluation findings. So basically here, the first criteria is to review the relevance of the project and how well it does fit to the country's strategy and the policy level. One thing, and I think is important and probably fundamental to remember, is that, which is not always the case for all projects, at least the project that I've been reviewing in other contexts, is that here there is, from the very beginning, there has been a very clear strategic drive or vision, which is to have Ukraine aligned to international ILO standards, but also to EU standards, which is, I would say, gives a lot of strength to the project and a lot of clarity into where the project intends to go. That has actually been made even clearer since the Ukraine was granted the EU candidate status last year, because definitely aligning to the EU directive has become a clear and a top priority for the country, but also not only aligning but implementing the legislation once it is approved. Obviously, so the project, I'm not going to go to the details because you know probably them better than me into technical details, but it's completely aligned to also the national development priorities. And then I would like to mention as well the recent 5-year plan that has been presented by the Ukrainian government. So basically, it's a reiteration that the project is really supporting a top priority for the country. I think it's also one thing that I would like to mention, I will come back to that, but under the relevance is that the role of the project, but also of ILO as an agency, is not just a technical service. ILO is not, in this case, and I've felt this I've heard that very strongly through the interviews, is that it's not about delivering technical expertise. It's about partnering. It's about accompanying and advising and exchanging with stakeholders. And that's what has actually this open channel somehow has kept the relevance, was made sure that the project was always on track because the project was open to receiving feedback from stakeholders. Probably, one of the key features of the project has been its ability to consult. It's something that I can say because I've been reviewing the first phase that I felt there that was very strongly actually under the management of Antonio, but that I've also felt under the management of Zsolt, and with the continued presence of Sofia and also Ina and the team, is that their ability and their attitude towards listening to the stakeholders and their concerns. So that's been really identified as a crucial aspect, which is about the coherence and the validity of the project design. So once again, I think it's important to, and you probably are aware of that, is that the project design was already clear in the first phase. That has been actually made even more clearly, or that has had a results framework that has really been detailed with the relevant indicators that has given the continued clarity under this phase as well. Again, I will mention, why is the design of the project being assessed as relevant? Because of course you've got again the higher level strategic drive, which is the EU integration. First phase was the alignment, but the second phase now, or more recently, is the alignment and the integration perspective. It's also the fact that is this ability of the project to interact and to have maintained very, I could talk not only the project team, but also the overall ILO office, but to have really into a permanent dialogue with the key stakeholders. That has really makes the difference. And there are also, it's backed by very clear standards, whether those are ILO standards or EU directives. So somehow the path is very clear, and that has guided the design of the project. One thing that is important, I will come back to that rapidly, but to mention that this is actually the same, the attitude of ILO and the project team to remain open, to consult with partners. It is what has been at the core of maintaining, of making the response to the war-related priorities, and the same way of the COVID priorities, by the way, relevant, because there was this permanent ability to interact and to get feedback from stakeholders to adjust the response to the crisis or the war-related OSH labor inspection priorities. Thank you. Project and effectiveness. Well, so you've already, I mean, we've viewed this morning the summary of the project results, and I'm not going to go into details about that, but just to say that first, as an evaluator, I've been impressed by the quantity of the results, the long list of results with such a small team is quite impressive. One thing that I would like to mention, so yeah, it's impressive because the team is very limited in comparison to the list and the quantity of results and the quality of results. That's really it seems that, you know, every topic has been really discussed in depth with the stakeholders. It's also impressive that the same quality has been also applied to first when responding to the COVID and adjusting, developing remote modalities, and to continue rapidly conveying the numerous events, whether those were advocacy roundtables or trainings. That has also somehow you could say that the COVID was, of course, it was unexpected, but has been a useful rehearsal to develop a remote modality intervention when the war broke up and when this had become a necessity. And the project, again, by the ability to make space to the stakeholders, has made sure that the response and the progress could actually move fast. That's actually quite impressive in light of the COVID and the challenge of the war, that the project has actually reached all of these results and exceeded most of the results as well. The one thing that's been discussed this morning is, and that I will come back to the recommendation, is I could hear and feel the frustration from a number of stakeholders, as the project has put so many efforts. And when I say the project, is the project's ability to involve and to make space for stakeholders to put a lot of efforts. As it's been really a long and profound effort and preparing the work to draft the OSH that has not yet seen validation. Hopefully it's only a matter of time. But again, that I think it's important to distinguish the validation. Validation is actually also the validation of an achievement, but the achievement is really the fact that all stakeholders were permanently mobilized over a numerous number of time. I also could hear during the interviews that there has been some frustration here and there about not always having all stakeholders' concern being reflected, but I could feel that somehow the core is that there's been a heavy consultation and space made for that. But I understand that as a part of it, some of the concern has not systematically been reflected. But I believe that this is going to continue. I mean, the space will be made in the future to discuss further concerns. One thing that also I think is really, I've rarely seen that in the many projects I've been evaluating, is that the project has been really rapid in adjusting and responding to the related priorities due to the war. So the increased physical risk, whether you were close to combat areas, but indirectly all of the implications or the multiple impact that the war can create, but also the invisible or most of the time invisible risk related to the psychological impact, but also situations of abuse and forced labor. And I think this is one very strong example of a project. We often, there's often this criticized that projects are either only directed at responding to the crisis and forget the necessary reform, or vice versa, only address the necessary reform but are not able to respond to the emergency needs. In this case, I think the reason why I could identify as being relevant in both continuing the reform that even in the context of the war remain highly necessary, and of course the increased risk of OSH in a war context as indicated that the reforms are necessary also in times of war, but also respond relevant to the emergency response, is because there has been continuous dialogue and exchange between the development track and the response track, and that has been really, I think, I've rarely seen such a better illustration of the development and the emergency track being coordinated and in a coherent manner. The efficiency of resource use, so as you know, most of the resources of the project are dedicated to organizing events. It's not about delivering heavy, expensive equipment. And so those have been costs before the COVID and before the war, but organizing physical events, but then later on with the COVID and the war, remote events. And I think somehow one of the positive things in all these dramatic developments is that the reach out of the project and to the stakeholders has not only been maintained, but also somehow more people were able to attend remote events. That I think has been commendable in terms of reach out. The value of money is really impressive as well. First of all, because when you look at the overall budget value and you look at, and fortunately, I think it would be really useful to have a sort of impact assessment conducted in the future to really see on the ground what prevention has meant to those fleeing, to those workers exposed, or to those workers who could have gone into maybe deeper depression or closer to a suicidal situation. I think it's really something that would be worth analyzing. But the feedback I was able to gather is that the efficiency is really high, and so behind organizing these events there stands a very small team, but very active. And I think the dedication of the team is also, and that's also the overall and the overwhelming feedback I could feel and hear from the stakeholders, is that there's really been a human team dedication of each and every individual, and a team that has been available. And usually it's not always, I usually find this not always underlined, and in this case I think you remove, it's not anyone can do the job, you remove the team. I'm not really sure that if you have this level of dedication, you will get this level of dedication. So efficiency is synonym to the team, and somehow the project could be synonym to the team. That has been making the space and being able to have a fluid exchange of information. Evaluation criteria. I'm also looking at the time. I have to accelerate a bit. So the effectiveness of management arrangement, I will go very quickly over this, saying that the project has used process and procedures that have been tested in the previous phase, but also that ILO tests and practices every day through its other project. So very smooth, very responsive, nothing much to say about this. Again, the attitude of the management of the team and the support behind the team has also been very rapid and showed flexibility. So my apologies. So nothing to say here in the sense that, and you would not have had all the results as well with effective procedures and management arrangement. One thing that I want to say here in that the team has also been strongly engaged in doing advocacy. I could hear that especially during the first 6 months of the war, there was an understandable attitude that, well, the war breaks out. There are better things or more important things to do than to continue get committed to reforms, especially, you know, including ocean conflict and especially the psychosocial dimension, which, you know, is very understandable. You've got, you know, the shock, the emotions, and the fightings and the priority. You've got somehow to put your hands where, you know, where the wounds are. But rapidly, and this is, I think, well, again, a very interesting example. Rapidly, people came to our institutions. All actors came to a situation where life has to go on. The Ukrainian economy, an economy in war, but still has to run, has to make profits, has to be active. And actually, I think that's a very important into the psychological to remain active, whatever the case. And that's actually the project has been very active through its intervention at the parliament, through I think there's been very good signs of the project being approached to fill the EU accession questionnaires, that the project has a very strong voice in saying, actually in saying, but also voicing the opinions of stakeholders that, yes, those reforms are necessary. They should not be stopped. And even though the draft Oslo has not been voted yet, it's only a matter of time, but it's very important. So it's not something that is for later or for when the war is over. It's something that really is a priority. And the advocacy activeness of the project has been really high and constant. The impact has been very strong in the short term, and again, that's admittedly limited from the point of view of the evaluation, because of course I could not access to the field, I could not talk to the field level stakeholders, but I was able to talk to a lot of you, to all stakeholders that were involved in the project, that are themselves in contact with the field. And from what I could hear and the feedback, the prevention role, on the psychological addressing tools that have been developed within companies, the undeclared work campaign, the campaign to prevent forced labor has been tremendous. And if you look just at the number of people reached by the campaigns, the feedback, the participation to the different social Facebook or the feedback is really an indication that it's been really strong. And it will be really interesting to see what is the impact on the long term. Trying to catch up a bit of time, sustainability. I think it's very important here to put things into perspective. First of all, I could really understand that was the same situation with the first phase and the second phase. The fact that the project is actually attached to a longer term strategy and a vision that is very clear with clear indicators is that it's not about the project, it's about the process. And as even Andrei was mentioning this morning in his introduction speech, the word towards is synonym to process, is where do we want to go. Now, I think the situation is very clear. You all want to go to a Ukraine that has not only a legislation that allows to implement standards, but definitely to have the capacity and to implement standards. And the project, so is addressing the legislation change, is addressing the capacity building, and is also somehow, I need to reconcentrate here, is also showing that he's following a process. And obviously the process does not end at the end of this phase. Clearly, we all know that it depends on donor funding. And one thing that has come very strongly from the evaluation is that indeed, there are many competing priorities. There are many needs of population that are in survival mode or whose livelihood have been affected. But nonetheless, if there are no such reforms, if the PSS, so psychosocial component, is not addressed over time and in the future as well, it means that people in tomorrow, not in 10 years, but tomorrow, will be further exposed. So this is important to say that the sustainability of the project is very strong, but provided that this effort is continued. Ideally, better with donor funding than without. I trust that all of you are committed, that the ILO is committed, but I think that what I could hear is that funds to maintain such a project and a team to continue making the space and to continue as well support the social dialogue, which, by the way, is also very importantly and has been appreciated as such, is not only happening in formal ways, but because of the project attitude in an informal way. I think it's very important. What has come very strongly is that this dialogue, and not only dialogue, but exchanges are very important and should be continuing. So, as I said before, I think the relevance of this project is also in the ability of being relevant in addressing the current priority that the country is facing, but also addressing the reforms. Actually, addressing the reforms is addressing both the urgent priorities and the longer-term priorities. So this remains relevant on both tracks. The other conclusion, key conclusion, is that the advocacy initiative and taken by the project has been really important. Of course, yes, it may not have been or may not have converted in having the draft Oslo being validated yet, but the advocacy has really kept the topic high on the agenda, and as I could hear from all stakeholders, as really is still very much of a strong interest and is acknowledged as a very important reform, as expressed by all stakeholders. And the third conclusion is, again, and I think this is really embodied by the project, is that it's not about delivering technical expertise. It's not just like, dropping knowledge and goodbye. It's really about all of the dialogue and I would say moral support and explaining. So what exactly does this mean in terms of what this how does this technical or EU directive means in terms of implementing? Can we get examples from how it is applied in other EU countries or other countries? So really, definitely, a very valuable added value is the human factor, is the way, is how you deliver the technical knowledge. We can now move to the lessons learned and good practices. I've kept only two, but there are many more, of course. Is that obviously, for instance, the one thing that has come very strongly, that has been mentioned by different stakeholders this morning, by Sergei, among other stakeholders, about the psychosocial dimension. Obviously, this is a huge topic. This is a huge topic for that is actually under longer-term reform, because unfortunately, but the reality is that the psychosocial dimension does not end with the end of the war. There are trauma and that are happening as a direct result of the war. There will be post-traumatic syndromes as well. And even in the normal world, and even before the war, there was a very heavy load of psychological stress, and somehow the war has only underlined that the psychosocial topic is a very crucial topic that we know it's not a trend. It's here to stay. It's probably big enough that it would be interesting for ILO to see whether it's all of those components stay under one project. The thematic is of course relevant, or whether depending on the volume of work, the objective or the funding available, whether this should be reorganized in terms of programming. The other lessons learned is that the advocacy has really, again, that's a team effort, has been really strong, and it has already been very encouraging because the feedback from key stakeholders that been really somehow, I mean, everybody has said, well, you know, it's been really great to have a project that is so vocal, that keeps on hammering the importance of the reform, and probably in the future, it has shown the importance of advocacy, that it works, and that maybe is valuable enough to maybe formulate it from the very beginning in a strategic way, in the sense of saying, like, what are the expectations of the project? It doesn't mean that what is this the responsibility of the project, but what is the project clearly expecting? And we've heard today, for instance, when Antonio mentioned that, the expectation is obviously that the draft law is validated so it can be implemented. Very quickly about the recommendation. The key one, the obvious and very strong recommendation is that that there is a need to continue the process. And again, I really want to highlight that the word process, it's not just about the project, especially now, since given that the Ukraine is actually engaged and has been granted in a candidate status. It's a long-term commitment. And it means that it's a partnership that goes beyond the project phase. And when you are into a partnership, the needs need to be attended as long as necessary. I've been working a lot with Western Balkan countries that have been in that process for many more years before Ukraine, and even today, there are still projects that are crucial in accompanying the capacity building and the development of institutions. So I believe that I mean, there is a very strong justification to continue the commitment of the project beyond the project level, but really to support the process, because in the end, you only get implementation, concrete results, if you accompany the process until the end and not stop in the middle of the way. The sub-recommendation I've said, but that's I don't want to spend much time about it. It's more for ILO to see, you know, well, how programming could be formulated, because obviously the project has shown that there's really a heavy workload of activities that maybe should be considered to break into smaller projects that are manageable in terms of workload. So the second one is the importance, recognize the importance. ILO is really acknowledged as a technical authority in Ukraine, and also as an somehow advisor. So the voice of ILO, which also reflects the concerns of all the key stakeholders, is that the advocacy needs to be continued. But it will be important to somehow set objective. Where do you want to go with the advocacy? If we talk about a 3-year project, where do you want to go? What are the expectations in terms of the 3 years? And by doing that, the evaluation believes it will be important, because that will be also a way to from the very beginning to say, okay, there is an expectation that this should be validated, that this process should take place. And so that also, you know, and a strategy would help identify who are the key stakeholders to talk to press on, to involve in the advocacy effort. And by formulating a public strategy and advocacy strategy, I think it will also get a commitment and define a role or an expectation from each and every stakeholder. And that relates actually to the following recommendation, which is to develop a theory of change for the project with change indicators. So when we talk about change indicators, there are changes that are under the responsibility or the accountability of the project. Obviously, for instance, the validation of a law is not under the responsibility of the project. The project doesn't have that power, but at least the project can show that it has done everything, for instance, consulted with stakeholders to prepare the ground for a reform to take place. And by distinguishing things, this from the change results from the project. In this case, for instance, if we talk about institutional validation, it could help identify the reasons why, or maybe what could be done if everything has been done by the project, what misses to, or what remains to be done for the validation. So recommendation could be formulated. And I think it could be useful to distinguish the change indicators under the project responsibility and influence, sphere of influence, and under the change, the end results that is not under the direct project responsibility, but that is an expectation, that is a reason of being of a project. And the last recommendation is about definitely that has come as well as a need expressed from the team to have a labor administration and inspection expert, actually that could be based in the regional office of ILO in Budapest, that actually could not only serve Ukraine. If I think about Moldova, that also has been granted recently the EU candidate status, will also, and there are so many links between Ukraine and Moldova in terms of the way forward, that it really makes sense to have such an expertise available at the regional level. I'm really sorry, I think I've really went beyond the time that I was allocated. My apologies for that, and thank you for listening. And now I'm leaving the floor if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Merci bien, monsieur Vasseur.
Merci.
Не треба вибачатися. Ми вам...
Don't say sorry. We are very grateful to you for this profound assessment and for that you've shared this information with us. And Sophia Litvin has written in the chat that they're grateful to everyone who participated in these interviews with Thomas, because it is your source data, your information that formed the ground for this professional evaluation assessment. I see no questions or hands, and that means that we are going to proceed with the wrap-up session. But before that, we will see a couple of slides. Life can be understood only when looking back, but you need to experience life looking ahead. This is Kierkegaard. So life can only be understood, realized when looking back, but you need to live your life while looking forward. Now, I pass the floor to Roman Poklonsky. Absolutely. Now I have my sound on. So thank you. Thank you all to all the organizers of the project, EU-ILO project. Thank you for your activities, for white books, for comparison tables, for every individual project, for the workshops, methodological guidelines, for the sets of my methodological guidelines prepared for the projects, even though sometimes they covered 100 pages or more, but we still try to be very attentive working on those. I hope that this is not the last project, that the work will continue and to a greater, to a better quality. And on the part of the Ministry of Economy, let me assure you that the labor reform is going to go on.
Many thanks to you, Mr. Poklonsky. And now the floor goes to Mr. Petro Tulei from the Confederation of Free Trade Unions of Ukraine. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's so sad to acknowledge that the project is over. But I believe that it's not the full stop. We would like to see the sustainability, and we would like to see the efforts to go on. as mentioned by our participants. Hopefully, the draft law on OSH finally will be approved. And on behalf of the trade unions, I'd like to say that a big number of people have participated in this project. During this event, over 170 people are participating. This means that the project is relevant, is interesting. People are passionate about this project and want it to be successfully accomplished. We've got ongoing war. It's a challenge. There are also some other challenges. Sooner or later, we believe the project's efforts won't go in vain. These efforts will be reflected in the legislation and future practices. Finally, we will adopt the standards and practices which Ukraine as the candidate state should live up to. I'm not going to elaborate on the project's importance. I would like to thank, first of all, the Budapest office that has been supporting the project. Many thanks to the national coordinator, Sergei Savchuk. This is the person who proved and actually the importance of this project, convinced the international community to launch the project. Many thanks to two project leads, Mr. Antonio Santos, who is a very emotional, very passionate and convincing person who actually irradiates the commitment. Also, many thanks to Mr. Dudas. He is he makes a calmer impression, so to say, but nonetheless he invests lots of efforts to finalize this project. Many thanks also to Ms. Sofia Litvin, to Ms. Inna Golek, and of course the gratitude extends to all our social partners. Ms. Nanichenko in her statement mentioned that social partners, due to the project's efforts, finally resume the meetings, the roundtables, the workshops on the platform of the Trilateral Council. So the social dialogue helped achieve some outcomes. Anyway, we progressed. We moved forwards along this spiral of development. Once again, many thanks to the passionate community that supported the social partners along this path. A big number of federations and confederations representatives partook in this project. Of course, I have to mention the Minister of Social Policy, the Federation of Employers Organizations, the Ministry of Economy, Trilateral Social Economic Council. Many thanks to all of you. And I won't say farewell to the project. I will say see you later. I am sure that we will get back to these topics. There will be a new project in Ukraine and we will perpetuate working in this field. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Tuley. Actually, you inspire us, but your confidence. And now the floor goes to Mr. Hanenko. Thank you very much, Andrei. Let me summarize our today's discussion. I've got a range of ideas during this quite a short time. First, we initiated creation of a working group advocating for prolongation of the project or launch a new project. And I would like to appeal to the Minister of Economy and the Minister of Social Policy. Your participation in this working group is essential. Please delegate someone from the Ministry of Social Policy. At the moment, Ms. Natalia has not proposed any candidates. On behalf of our organization, I'd like to thank the evaluator of project for your profound analysis and your useful recommendations. And finally, let me thank all the project partners, especially our team of enthusiastic healthcare professionals who recognized their responsibility for such field as psychosocial support of healthcare professionals and other workers being active in other economic sectors. Lots of work lies ahead. We have to mobilize the best experts and start progressing. I think that in course of our dialogue, we will come up with the best ideas of the ways to achieve our goal. Each of us, each citizen of Ukraine and the country on the whole needs these achievements. I wish you pleasant holidays, Easter holidays, and I wish all of us to be victorious in our own sectors. Glory to Ukraine and glory to heroes. Many thanks to Mr. Hanenko, who emphasized the crucial role of the dialogue, which facilitates achievement of the goals. And hopefully this dialogue further on will be an efficient tool. I failed to notice the time when Mr. Pilgrim joined our meeting, representing another project, which is under care of the regional office. So, Mr. Pilgrim, over to you.
Dober din, and thanks, Mr. Kulikov. A pleasure to see you again, this time virtually. And I hope very soon again in person. I'm heading the ILO office for Central and Eastern Europe. We cover 18 ILO member states in Central and Eastern Europe. The biggest country we cover is Ukraine. And we have currently 12 staff members working out of Kiev. And as Mr. Kulikov mentioned, I'm based in Budapest, taking care of the entire region. So I've been asked to give a concluding remark at the end of 4 hours, so I'm better very brief. I will not say anything about the key achievements because we had several interventions on what the project achieved. The external evaluator, Thomas Vasseur, also covered this topic to quite some extent. So I better conclude with an outlook, what's next. And this fits very well with the quote Mr. Kulikov showed to us from the very famous Danish philosopher Kierkegaard. I think in the short run, the ball is very much in the court of the Ukrainian government, to use soccer language. The project helped to elaborate draft legislation on occupational safety and health. It's now with the Ukrainian parliament. Same holds true for the important project of coming out with a new labor code for Ukraine, to which we also, within the scope of this project, but also beyond the project, we contributed a lot. We helped to convey meetings with the social partners, discussing this key project. So both key initiatives on creating new modern legislation are with the parliament, and we hope that both initiatives will advance very soon. I can only assure you that we are around to assist you, the government and the social partners, if there's any further need to discuss again the technical comments we provided or any other subject you want to discuss. Otherwise, I think we have laid the ground for implementing the new legislation, which means we have assisted the Labor Inspectorate in Ukraine to take over a crucial role in supervising, informing, and enforcing any new legislation that will be adopted. We are there to assist you in implementing any new labor legislation, OSH legislation that will come out. I would say this is the advantage of working with a specialized UN agency like the ILO. We are not a consulting firm. Ukraine has been a member of the ILO for decades and will remain a member. So we are around to respond to this important member state, whether there's a project or no project. That doesn't really matter. Of course, let's be honest, with the limited regular budget resources we have, this assistance has its limits, and the EU project helped us enormously to increase our footprint. But I should also inform you on this occasion that the ILO itself has recently decided to expand its footprint. The governing body has decided at the request of the ILO Director General to establish a full country office in Ukraine with an internationally recruited country director. Again, we have been around in the country for decades with very qualified staff, but it means the ILO itself will make available more staff, more non-staff resources for a larger office to be opened later this year in Kiev. This is our response to the Russian invasion in Ukraine and the needs for a quick recovery and reconstruction of the country. So this larger country office will also be around to assist on any maintenance work, aftercare of the project. Finally, let's try to think big. I mean, the times are very challenging for Europe and especially for Ukraine. So we need to think big when thinking about the future of decent work, of good work in Ukraine. What I and colleagues propose for the future is to intensify our joint work on promoting safe and declared work with a sectoral focus. That means to focus on risk-prone sectors such as construction, which will play a key role in reconstructing, rebuilding the country, mining, forestry, road transportation, port workers. So these are all sectors that are relatively known for a lot of work accidents, sometimes fatal work accidents. And I think if we try to reflect about the next phase of the collaboration, I would recommend to take this sectoral focus to advance on creating safe and good jobs in Ukraine. I would also strongly suggest to continue the work on using the Labor Inspectorate on preventing labor exploitation for Ukrainians fleeing from the war, either fleeing abroad or fleeing within the country. A lot has been said already on this. No need to provide any details. And last not least, I would also suggest to continue working on what we introduced after the outbreak of the war, using labor inspectors as a referral service for psychosocial support at the workplace. We all know that this will play a key role, as unfortunately we have many people coming to work suffering from post-traumatic stress disorders and other psychological illnesses. These are my 3 suggestions on what to do next, apart from providing further support on important legislative initiatives. We are ready to work with our Ukrainian partners and the donor community on these ideas. Last not least, and I think that is a must for any concluding remarks, a big thank you at the end of 6 years of work on improving safety at work in Ukraine. First of all, I would like to thank all Ukrainian constituents for their dedicated work, especially during the past 14 months under very difficult conditions of war. I truly admire the resilience of our Ukrainian partner and the Ukrainian society at large. I would also like to thank the European Union as development partner and sponsor, not only for being very flexible when it came to reprogramming the project under conditions of war, but more important, I think it has been a very good alliance and collaboration, because we very much share the same values when it comes to the world of work. Just as a reminder to all of you, if you read the European Pillar of Social Rights from 2017, there's a great similarity with the ILO vision, ILO key agenda. So that is very helpful. And as we all know, many parts of the EU acquis when it comes to world of work refer to international labor standards. Also in this area, you can find same values and a lot of similar approaches. And then last not least, a big thanks to the project team, Scholt Dudas, the project manager, Antonio Sanch, who's also been with us during today, the former project manager. I think this is also a great sign of continuity that we could have the participation of the 2 of them, to Sofia Litwin, our project coordinator for many years, and to Ina Holyuk, project assistant that has been so helpful in organizing all the events, also this closing event. And he was mentioned, he's not part of the project team, he's not paid by the European Union, but by the ILO, but he made crucial contributions to this project and others, our national coordinator, Sergei Savchuk. So thanks for listening to me, and back to our lovely facilitator, Mr. Kulikov.
Дуже дякую, thank you, Herr Pilgrim. Ми говорили тут багато конкретно.
So we've mentioned a lot of specific things, and some things were mentioned figuratively. Mr. Pilgrim mentioned the ball that is on Ukraine's side of the field, and Serhiy Semenko describes the European frame in the chat, the frame that requires the canvas, Ukrainian canvas, and paint. And he says that we must create a decent labor environment. And but we have not yet mentioned the genre of this picture, if it's going to be a portrait or a paysage, or maybe a genre picture drawing. We'll see. But it's important that the paint sticks. And speaking about sports competition and this reference, well, of course, if it is a marathon, you rather think about, so this is a long marathon run, it's not a football game. And in this sense, the European Union that funded the project, and by the way, Sofia Litvin writes in the chat that this investment is already generated truth, and Mr. Andreev responds that that's true. So the European Union, this is the party that in this marathon run offer a glass of some beverage that keeps you going. And thank you all. It has been helpful, sometimes even emotional. And that's a proof of very serious attitude. And now I'm going to tell you something that seems to be irrelevant to what has happened today, but actually it is relevant. Recently, I watched Mavka, the Forest Song movie, and there the audience, before they were allowed into the hall, into the cinema hall, they told us all, don't leave after you see the end on the screen, because then there is something else after the end notion. So now it's going to be something interesting and significant, and you will see that on the screen. And I ask you to watch that not to the end, to watch it till the new beginning. And after that, after you see the frame that makes it clear that this is it, that you will see me again, and I will have a request for you. Okay, so now we are going to watch those people who have been mentioned or not, but all of them have contributed to the work and success of the project. And I hope that out of 145 people who are still with us, that at least 100 stay